everyone, Dave here, and welcome to Tolkien Adaptation Month 2, back in The Hobbit. Last year I began our celebration of 20 years of Fellowship of the Ring by listing my complaints about Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies. Now we're celebrating 20 years of The Two Towers, the movie that some of my biggest complaints came from, the movie that was arguably changed the most from the book. So to honor that movie, now I want to talk about the changes the movies made to the books that I like. So welcome back to Tolkien Month, and welcome back to the D-List, the show where I list things and my name begins with a D. Yes, many fans don't want to admit it, but not every difference between source material and adaptation is inherently a bad thing. Sometimes doing things a little bit different from the text can still make for an enjoyable movie. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that these changes are improvements from the book, but I generally think these were the right choices for this particular film adaptation. And much like last year, some of these are big changes, but a lot of these are really tiny things that a lot of casual readers wouldn't even notice. But they're tiny things that actually do make a big difference when you think about them. And I think the difference was worth it in these cases. So we'll get to the list in a moment. But first, 2 honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 1. Giving the Balrog wings. Now this is an honorable mention because Jackson didn't think he was making a change here.
And he's got wings.
He has got wings. I read the book and I imagine Tolkien's describing wings. I don't know what the big fuss is about.
Now, the do Balrogs have wings debate has been covered extensively elsewhere. I don't need to get into the details, but the point is there's enough ambiguity in the text to keep the debate going. Now, personally, I don't think the book does describe the Balrog as having literal wings, so I think this is a change to the text, but I think the Balrog looks cooler with wings than it would without them, so I like it. Honorable mention number 2.
Where to begin?
Telling the story chronologically. This is an honorable mention because this change wasn't invented by this adaptation. Most adaptations do it, and it's not really a change to the story so much as the presentation of the story, but it's worth noting because it's a change that Tolkien himself had opinions on. So for those of you who haven't read the trilogy, it's not actually a trilogy, it's actually 6 books. Each of the 3 books contain 2 books, totaling 6 books. Book 3, which is the first half of The Two Towers, goes back and forth between following Aragorn and his crew into Rohan and following Merry and Pippin into Fangorn. And Book 4, the second half of Two Towers, follows Frodo and Sam into Mordor. And then books 5 and 6 in Return of the King are split similarly. Tolkien really believed that the scenes should be experienced in the order he presented them, but let me tell you, when I first read The Two Towers when I was too young for it, I found myself bored by all the Rohan stuff in Book 3 and just waiting for it to get back to Frodo and Sam. And then when it did get back to Frodo and Sam in Book 4, I found myself bored by all the trudging through Mordor. Now, rereading the trilogy as an adult, I'm not bored. I appreciate both of these books a lot, but I just kept waiting as a kid for it to get to the parts I wanted to hear about, and so I would have been grateful for the pacing of the film as a child, and I think it's the right call to make here, even if Tolkien himself would disagree with me. And now on to the list proper. Number 14. Increasing the urgency. Now, this isn't a single specific moment so much as a general strategy that was applied throughout the adaptation, and it's a strategy that I think was the right move, at least most of the time. Lord of the Rings has a reputation for being kind of a slow read. It luxuriates in long descriptions of parts of the journey, and yeah, people often make fun of it for being just a lot of descriptions of landscape and people walking. So the movie decided to increase the urgency of that walking. I don't mean increase the stakes. The stakes were always high, even in the book, but you know, it's a less leisurely journey than it seems to be when you're reading the book. Now, the way that they increased the urgency, it was actually many ways. One of them is cutting the 17 years that passed between Bilbo's party and Frodo going on the quest.
17 years passed sleepily in the Shire.
And especially cutting all the time Frodo waited after hearing about the truth of the ring before actually setting out on the journey.
We must leave.
and leave quickly.
I mean, I like how strategic Frodo is about it in the book, but I don't know if general movie audiences would have accepted Frodo learning that he basically has a doomsday device and keeping it any longer than he has to threatens him and the entire Shire, and then being like, well, I'll just wait several months, maybe I'll go on my birthday. Another example of increasing the urgency is making Frodo much weaker when stabbed by the Morgul blade. Obviously in the book, he is in severe pain, and he basically just gets to Rivendell in the nick of time, but after being stabbed at Weathertop, he's still kinda lighthearted and jovial. I mean, he's trying to keep up his lighthearted energy, obviously, he's making an effort, but he's joking around with the hobbits about the trolls and stuff. I think it works in the movie that he is basically unable to say anything between Weathertop and Rivendell.
Look, Frodo. It's Mr. Bilbo's trolls. Mr. Frodo?
Speaking of which, the flight to the fort is another place where they kind of cut out the waiting between Glorfindel's arrival and Frodo's departing to Rivendell.
There are 5 wraiths behind you. Where the other 4 are, I do not know.
It's probably for the best that it's just immediately, boom, the Black Riders are on your tail.
Ride hard. Don't look back.
Naralim, Asfalov, Naralim.
There's also in the book a much larger span of time between Pippin making the noise in the well in Moria and the orcs descending upon them. I like how in the movie it's basically, here's this sound, now all the bad guys are here.
Frodo. Orcs.
Increasing the urgency also includes amping up the action sequences in the book. Some things that aren't really described as being action sequences are turned into action sequences in the movie, such as the escape across the Brandywine River. In the book, a Black Rider wasn't, like, right on top of them or anything. They get on the ferry, but in the distance they see sinisterly the Black Rider looking for them. I think that could have been a very cool and effective creepy scene, but I think this escaping by the seat of their pants also makes for a very exciting film scene.
How far to the nearest crossing?
The Brandywine Bridge. 20 miles.
Granted, not every increase of action sequences is a good thing. Sometimes it can go too far. So it would probably surprise everyone to know that Jackson actually cut an action sequence from the book. Between Caradhras and Moria, there's actually a warg attack that just doesn't happen in the movie. Well, doesn't happen in this movie. I suspect that the warg attack that does happen in the Two Towers movie, that doesn't happen in that book, is just this warg attack being transplanted, but I don't know. Also just everyone fighting and arguing and yelling at each other in the Council of Elrond. I've seen people criticize this for making the council seem a lot more foolish than the actual wise council they were supposed to be in the book, and I get that criticism, but I actually like the way this really amps up Frodo's anxiety and just drives him to make the choice he has to make. Now again, I'm not saying this is better than the book, because the slower pace of the events in the book is one of the things that make it feel like you're reading a real history when you're reading the pages of the text. And picking up the pace is exactly what a real biopic of said real history would do. So in a way, amping up the tension and the action kinda serves the meta-narrative of the book. The historians told it one way, and Hollywood told it another way. Number 13. Conflating characters. Some characters are just eliminated from the movie altogether, and some characters have their roles replaced by other characters who are already in the story. And for the most part, I think these were the right call to make. For example, one of the most famous, replacing Glorfindel with Arwen.
Frodo. Im Arwen Telin Lethide.
Look, Glorfindel's awesome, but the movie, even in the extended edition, did not have time to go into how awesome he is. It makes sense to replace him with someone else who would be in the story, and it makes sense to replace him with the right kind of elf, Bakshi. So, if you're going to amplify Arwen's role anyway, and it makes sense to amplify Arwen's role for many other reasons, it makes sense to replace Glorfindel with Arwen.
Arwen's great!
Similarly, replacing Erkenbrand with Eomer. Yes, technically Bakshi did this one first, but in this case especially, I really think it was the right move.
Theoden King stands alone.
not alone.
Theoden lost his son and cast out his nephew while he was under Saruman's spell, so when he feels absolutely no hope, it's really, really emotional when that nephew he cast out comes back for him. Sorry, Erkenbrand, you're just not as interesting.
The stupid Iowa.
Number 12. Treebeard bringing Merry and Pippin to the White Wizard. Last year I went into the end stuff that I hated, but here's something I liked.
The White Wizard will know.
The White Wizard.
Saruman.
Yeah, this moment doesn't happen in the book. In fact, Merry and Pippin are the ones who have to tell Treebeard that Gandalf fell in Moria. So I like here not only that they have this sort of misdirect where you think Treebeard might be evil and bringing them to Saruman, but I also like that Merry and Pippin get a little bit of hope here. They had just been through a lot. It's nice that they get to be the first to find out that Gandalf came back.
Merry and Pippin are quite safe.
It was really nice of Gandalf to give the hobbits this little bit of hope, and to give the rest of the Fellowship hope about the hobbits. Not that his positive attitude towards the hobbits lasts very long.
Hobbits. This new Gandalf's more grumpy than the old one.
Number 11. Gandalf's reluctance to enter Moria. In the book, when all other paths seem hopeless, Gandalf suggests going through Moria, which Gimli is intrigued by. And it's actually Aragorn who's nervous about the idea of going through Moria, and actually warns Gandalf against doing so. Of course, in the film, this was not how things played out.
I would not take the road through Moria unless I had no other choice.
I like this change because I just like the tragedy of it. I like that Gandalf knows that whatever fate meets him in Moria, it's not going to be good.
Moria, you fear to go into those mines. The dwarves delved too greedily and too deep.
I mean, obviously, it's not his final fate in Moria, but if you're a first-time viewer, you don't know that, and I really like the tragedy here of Gandalf really trying to avoid this fate and just having to do it because it's what the Fellowship needs.
So be it.
An additional note about Moria, in the book, Gimli is excited to see the halls of his people, but he is not nearly as optimistic about Balin being there as he is in the film.
My cousin Balin would give us a royal welcome.
But of course, readers of the book already knew Balin in The Hobbit. So when they find Balin's tomb, it's heartbreaking for us because we had an adventure with him. An adventure where he was the dwarf who showed Bilbo the most kindness.
Oh, no.
But people seeing the movies first would have had no emotional attachment to Balin, so having Gimli caught by surprise by his loss was a brilliant way to give that moment even a sliver of the weight it had in the text. Number 10. The Elves at Helm's Deep. I'm probably gonna get hate for this. I don't care. I love that the elves show up to help. Maybe I'm just too annoyed by the other major beat changes in Two Towers to be annoyed by this one too, but I think it's great that there's a new last alliance of elves and men. It's like this and Faramir and the Ents are the big three changes to Two Towers, and I hate those other two, and I love this one.
An alliance once existed between elves and men. Long ago we fought and died together. We come to honor that allegiance.
I think it really fits in with one of Tolkien's themes, specifically about how evil endures when good people don't bandy together to stand up to it. So it's nice that the good men have good elves come bandy with them.
We are proud to fight alongside men once more.
I know there are legitimate reasons to not like this change, especially for lore purists, but I like it. Number 9. Galadriel knowing about Gandalf. I just realized a lot of these are Moria-centric. I don't know what that means. In the book, when the Fellowship arrives in Lothlorien, Galadriel asks where Gandalf is. In the movie, her lines here were given to Celeborn, and Galadriel knows Gandalf fell, even if it's ambiguous how many details she knows.
Tell me, where is Gandalf? For I much desire to speak with him.
So it's kind of ambiguous if she knew the whole time that Gandalf had fallen, or if she could read it in the Fellowship's thoughts, because she is kind of saying it like she's just finding it out for the first time.
He has fallen into shadow.
But either way, she doesn't need to ask. And that's the kind of mysterious that I like for Galadriel. I mean, I already mentioned how I don't love how creepy Lothlorien is the whole time around, but Galadriel being mysterious, I'm all about that. I just like wise old characters who are vague and mysterious. How much does she know? Does she know everything? She seems to be able to be reading people's minds. Is there anything Galadriel doesn't know?
Do you know everything? I really don't know, sir.
Number 8. Éowyn and Theoden's final moment. Theoden's death is sad in the movie, but in the book there's an added heartbreaking irony to it. He closed his eyes and Merry bowed beside him. Presently he spoke again. I would send word to Éowyn. She would not have me leave her, and now I shall not see her again. Dearer than daughter. Lord, began Merry brokenly. She is... But at that moment there was a great clamor, and all around them horns and trumpets were blowing. And then further down the page, slowly Theoden opened his eyes. Seeing the banner, he made a sign that it should be given to Éomer. Hail, King of the Mark, he said. Ride now to victory. Bid Éowyn farewell. And so he died, and knew not that Éowyn lay near him. Yeah, it's great writing, it's heartbreaking, it's tragically ironic, it's beautiful. But I'm really glad that in the movie Theoden got one last moment with Éowyn, and that he got to know that she was a warrior.
I am going to save you.
You already did.
It's still heartbreaking in the movie, but at least there's this added sense of closure, which I appreciate as a filmgoer watching a movie about light shining through the darkness. Number 7. Gandalf doesn't touch the ring. So there are some parts in the book where Gandalf seems to handle the ring a little more casually than he does in the movie. Not casually, just more casually. You still have got the ring in your pocket, said the wizard. Well, so I have, cried Bilbo. And my will and all the other documents too. You had better take it and deliver it for me. That will be safest. No, don't give the ring to me, said Gandalf. Put it on the mantelpiece. It will be safe enough there till Frodo comes. I shall wait for him. Bilbo took out the envelope, but just as he was about to set it by the clock, his hand jerked back, and the packet fell on the floor. Before he could pick it up, the wizard stooped and seized it and set it in its place. So sure, Gandalf doesn't physically touch the ring here, he just touches the envelope, much like he does in the movie, but still I think going straight from, don't hand it to me, to, here, I'm gonna pick it up, would read as kinda silly to a movie-going audience. But then later in Chapter 2, after Gandalf returns from his research trip, he does physically hold the ring to examine it for markings.
Can you see any markings on it?
I like that in the movie, Gandalf doesn't physically touch the ring at any point. He holds the envelope, like he does earlier in the book, and he holds the ring with tongs, but his skin never makes contact with the ring, and he doesn't even pick it up himself. He comes close, but he stops. It helps visually make the ring feel more dangerous. If such a powerful and wise wizard is afraid to even touch the ring, boy, this thing must be bad. Number 6. Sam's speech at the end of The Two Towers. Look, I hate everything about Faramir taking the hobbits to Gondor. I hate everything about that subplot, but I do like that it led to the speech Sam gives.
It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy?
It's such a good speech. It's such a good way to emotionally wrap up the movie. It does set up the later conversation that's actually from the text about their story. And it's really good. I really think they could have gotten there without character assassination for Faramir, but you know, it's a very good speech, and it really helps give the movie structure when they had already chopped off the beginning and the end of the book and put them in different movies.
There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
Number 5. Merry's no questions asked attitude. One of my favorite chapters in book 1 is A Conspiracy Unmasked. What happens in this chapter is Frodo has to tell Merry and Pippin that he's not actually settling down in Buckland. He's leaving the Shire, possibly forever, on this really dangerous journey. But when he attempts to tell Merry and Pippin about it, they already know. Not only do they know about the quest, they know about the ring, and they're willing to do whatever Frodo needs to keep the quest going. It's a great chapter that really showcases both the loyalty of the hobbits and their cleverness, their ability to make these plans all in the name of supporting each other, even at danger to themselves. So I don't love that we lose that chapter in the movie, but I do love what replaces it.
I have to leave the Shire. Sam and I must get to Bree.
Right. Buckleberry Ferry. Follow me.
Yeah, here in the movie, Merry doesn't know about the ring, he doesn't know about the quest, he just knows that Frodo really needs help and it's serious, and he is all in. And at the end of the first movie, there's another added scene where Merry and Pippin see Frodo leaving on his own, so once again, they immediately do whatever it takes to help him.
He's leaving. Run, Frodo. Go.
Hey, you! Over here!
Movie Merry is just down for whatever for his friends. You need to get to Bree, Merry's your guy. You need to move, Merry's there with his pickup truck. You need a body buried, Merry only asks how big a hole you need. So no, this version of Merry and Pippin don't always come off as smart or as wise as the book characters, but they are just as loyal, and this is a fantastic way of showing it. Number 4. Saruman wants to work with Sauron. So not only was Saruman's role amplified for the movie, his motivations were also changed. In the book, Saruman wants the ring for himself. He wants to be a great power in Middle-earth, and he thinks that he can wield the ring.
And why not, Gandalf? He whispered. Why not the ruling ring? If we could command that, then the power would pass to us. That is in truth why I brought you here. For I have many eyes in my service, and I believe that you know where this precious thing now lies. Is it not so? Or why do the Nine ask for the Shire? And what is your business there? Saruman, I said, standing away from him. Only one hand at a time can wield the one, and you know that well, so do not trouble to say we. But I would not give it. Nay, I would not give even news of it to you, now that I learn your mind. You were head of the council, but you have unmasked yourself at last. Well, the choices are, it seems, submit to Sauron or to yourself.
Against the power of Mordor, there can be no victory. We must join with him, Gandalf. We must join with Sauron.
I think both motivations are clear and effective, but I do think movie audiences would have trouble believing that Saruman was so wise if he actually believes that he can control this ring that just controls everybody who tries to control it.
I did not seriously think that a hobbit could contend with the will of Sauron. There are none who can.
On the other hand, Saruman being opportunistic, Saruman being pragmatic, Saruman just believing that this is the best horse to back, that's more believable from someone renowned for their wisdom. I mean, it's not wisdom, but it is, thinking, well, this is the best move right now.
It would be wise, my friend.
Plus, outright declaring a union between the two towers probably helped stop people from asking why the second movie was called that.
To stand against the might of Sauron and Saruman, and the union of the two towers.
Number 3. Merry recognizing Éowyn. So in the book, when Éowyn goes off to battle, she goes in disguise as a soldier named Durnhelm, and even Merry does not recognize her. He doesn't realize it's Éowyn until she slays the Witch King, and he's just like, oh crap, it's Éowyn.
'Tis Lord Theoden's niece!
Now I do like that in the book, Merry feels like he's completely alone when he's going off into battle, but I also like in the movie that Merry and Éowyn have this bond.
Whatever happens, stay with me. I'll look after you.
Both of them have been told they don't belong here, but both of them need to be here. So I'm glad that they're here together. And it's just another great example of movie Mary being down for anything. Like, he thinks he's not going to get to go to battle, but then he's there with Éowyn and he's like, okay, this could work out.
Ride with me.
My lady.
Number 2. The Army of the Dead. So in the book, Aragorn just uses the Army of the Dead to get the ships. They don't actually come to the Battle of Pelennor Fields and fight. That would have been really underwhelming in a movie. It is much, much cooler to actually see them fight in the battle.
We fight.
Like, could you imagine watching the movie, watching them go into the Paths of the Dead, encountering all these ghosts, and then find that it basically just amounted to a side quest? At that point, you might as well do the Rankin Bass thing of just having them appear on ships out of nowhere.
As the flagship standard broke the wind, it displayed the sign no lord had borne for years, and which only one lord could bear.
And Aragorn being true to his word allows them to address the question of why the Army of the Dead doesn't continue to fight with them in the next battle.
I hold your oath fulfilled. Go. Be at peace.
I'm just saying, it is much better in an action movie to have a worthwhile payoff to your Chekhov's ghost. And my number 1 favorite change that the Lord of the Rings movies made to the books, number 1 is the most famous cut from book to screen. So famous, in fact, that a lot of you thought I was building to it in last year's list. But nope, the change that I like best for the movie, the change that I think more than any was 100% the right call for this particular adaptation of Lord of the Rings, cutting Tom Bombadil. This was the right call, but not necessarily for the reasons you might think. Tom Bombadil is a divisive figure. There are fans of the book who outright hate him. It's often said that he contributes very little to the plot, that he has world-breaking powers, that his inexplicable presence throws a wrench in the otherwise intricately crafted lore and history Tolkien worked so hard on. Me? I love him. I think his chapters are fun and exciting, and I think he's a delightful presence in the world of Middle-earth. I think the fact that Tolkien's otherwise intricate world contains a detail that even he didn't fully understand makes the world all the richer. But unlike the Scouring, I think removing him from the film version of the world was the right call. So what is the narrative function of the Bombadil episode? Well, pragmatically, it gives the hobbits ponies, swords, and instructions to go to the Prancing Pony. Those elements were easily either dropped or shuffled around.
Make for the village of Bree.
Bree. What about you?
I'll be waiting for you at the Inn of the Prancing Pony.
These are for you. Keep them close.
And if you look at the edit, we don't know that they didn't go into the Old Forest. We don't know that they didn't meet Tom.
We just know that they didn't get the same stuff from that journey. But in terms of the arc, the Old Forest's role is much more tonal, because the Old Forest marks the transition between the kid-friendly feel of The Hobbit and the more serious feel of the rest of Lord of the Rings. We've already gotten hints at this point in the book that things are going to get darker here. The Shadow of the Past tells us that the stakes are much grander, and we've already been on the run from Black Riders. But this chapter is where the transition becomes real, because here we have Tom Bombadil, the fairy taliest of fairy tale characters, a character who would feel right at home in The Hobbit. The time spent in his house honestly echoes the time spent in Beorn's house pretty closely. And then we immediately go to the Barrow-wights, the scariest creatures the hobbits have ever encountered. This is the first real, legitimate peril that the hobbits face directly, and they can't get through it without Tom's help. But they still come through the other side better prepared for how dark the journey ahead will get. I love it, and I think it works great in the book. But the movie didn't need that tonal shift because the movie didn't start with The Hobbit. There was nothing to transition from. And instead, that pivotal moment of facing danger head on, not being able to take it on yourself, but being able to take it on with help from outsiders, that's given to Weathertop and the Flight to the Ford. And Bombadil is replaced with Aragorn and Arwen. Now, especially Flight to the Ford, because in the book, Glorfindel sent Frodo on the horse alone, and then Frodo had to stand up to the riders himself.
By all the Shire, you shall have neither the ring nor me!
Frodo in the movie is clearly not capable of standing up to the riders himself because of that aforementioned heightened urgency, so Arwen being there to stand up for the riders, that's the movie's equivalent of Bombadil being there to stand up to the Barrow-wights.
If you want him, come and claim him.
So every function of the Bombadil episode in the book was deftly handled elsewhere in the movie. And again, I love the Bombadil episode in the book, and I would love to see it brought to the screen, like a short film that's just the House of Tom Bombadil. And I'd love an animated short that's based on the poetry book of Tom Bombadil. And, you know, let's get Bombadil to show up in Rings of Power at some point. I want to see more Bombadil. But Peter Jackson didn't need Bombadil for his movie, so cutting him was the right call. And there you have it, the changes to the movies that I liked, 1 year after the changes to the movies that I hated. If there's a change that I didn't mention this year or last year, you can safely assume it's a change I'm completely neutral on. But I would love to hear your take. Is there another change to the novels that you liked, or did you hate one of these changes that I liked? Let's discuss this all in the comments, and... I'm surprised how much runtime is left in this video. How am I going to fill the rest of this time? Oh, I know. In last year's D-list about Jackson's changes to Tolkien, I had another mini D-list inside it, so I guess I should do that again. So here we go. Here's a little D-list of the top things I liked about Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy. Because what better way to talk about the Hobbit trilogy than to unnecessarily extend something else you thought you were here to watch? Look, the internet doesn't need another person to examine what went wrong with the Hobbit trilogy. Plenty of people have discussed the misguided drive to turn one book into 3 movies, and the impossible task of serving the diametrically opposed dual masters of faithful Hobbit adaptation and tonal Lord of the Rings prequel, leading to a movie that weirdly rushes through what's in the book in favor of dragging out what's not in the book, and it applies world-changing stakes to this personal quest, but it still tries to be a children's story, so it shoehorns in the cartooniest action sequences since the beginning of Pirates 2, throwing 2 tones at each other, resulting in a mess. The internet doesn't need someone else to say all that. But it can't be stressed enough that adapting The Hobbit into the Lord of the Rings film world was an impossible task. It's very likely that the only way to do a good Hobbit adaptation in the same franchise as a good Lord of the Rings adaptation is to do The Hobbit first, so the tonal shifts into Lord of the Rings can build on the tone of The Hobbit. Again, that's why you have Bombadil. But regardless of how misguided the task was, these are the movies we have. And when you dig through the mess, there are quite a few shining gems in these movies, and I'm going to list some of them. Now, these aren't all changes. Some of these are just things that were adapted particularly well, but these are the aspects that keep me going through the Hobbit movies. Number 6. Bilbo at Rivendell. Okay, the Shards of Narsil and the Ring Tapestry were a little over the top, but look at Bilbo's face here. Look at the peace he feels in Rivendell. It might be even more peace than he feels at home. You look at this and you're like, yeah, of course Bilbo's gonna retire there. For a scene that's basically all just B-roll and establishing shots, this is a really nice little moment and really helps you get inside the Hobbit's head. And one of the additions to the movie that I really like is this little conversation between Bilbo and Elrond.
Not with your companions. I shan't be missed.
For one thing, I like that this sets up a friendship between Bilbo and Elrond.
I've heard that hobbits are very resilient.
Really?
But even more importantly, I like that this gives Bilbo the choice of abandoning the quest. The option to just stay in Rivendell because, yeah, that's an option worth considering. I mean, have you seen the way the dwarves have been treating him? And have you seen the way he reacts to Rivendell?
You are very welcome to stay here, if that is your wish.
And that makes it all the better when Bilbo actually does specifically choose, to stay with the dwarves and help them on their adventure.
You don't have one? A home. It was taken from you. But I will help you take it back if I can.
See, I don't dislike everything that was added to the movies. I really like the stuff that fleshes out the characters and feels true to their spirits. Number 5. Misty Mountains Cold.
Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old.
Look, I said it last year and I'll say it again. I don't think there's ever been a bad version of this song. Every adaptation has their own take on Far Over the Misty Mountains Cold, and they're all great. This one is still not my favorite, as I addressed last year, but it's really good. It's haunting, it's chilling, it's just full of that mystery that entices Bilbo, but still kind of scares him. It's a really good part. Number 4. Making Durin's Day predictable. Okay, this might be the single biggest change to Tolkien's lore in the Hobbit trilogy, but I think this was the right call to make. See, in the book, when they find out that the secret passage can be found on Durin's Day, Thorin is not encouraged because it lies beyond their skill to predict when Durin's Day will come next. In the movie, on the other hand, they just know when it is.
Summer is passing. Durin's Day will soon be upon us.
We still have time.
Time for what?
To find the entrance.
I think this was the right call because it not only gives the quest a clear ticking clock, it also makes it feel like much less of a coincidence that they happen to be in the right spot on the right day. Obviously, that coincidental element worked fine for a children's fairy story, but for a movie that's a prequel to movies that took themselves much more seriously, I don't think it would have flown. Number 3. The subtle hints about Sauron. So in The Hobbit, Gandalf occasionally mentions the Necromancer. He's basically just an off-screen presence to give Gandalf something else to do to get him away from the dwarves. In Lord of the Rings, it's revealed that the Necromancer was actually Sauron regaining his power. This is a retcon, but it is canon, so it's worth addressing if you're adapting The Hobbit into a medium that you've already adapted Lord of the Rings into. And early on in the movies, there are some pretty good acknowledgments of that. There are subtle hints that Sauron is coming back.
Since when do mountain trolls venture this far south?
Ooh, not for an age. Not since a darker power ruled these lands.
I like that this noteworthy rise of evil in Middle-earth is tied to Sauron. I just wish they had left it to these subtle hints and not put so much focus on dealing with him, taking that away from dealing with, the actual plot of The Hobbit. Like, they could have had one scene of Gandalf fighting with the Necromancer or something, and then as he's driven away from Mirkwood, that's when Gandalf finds out, oh my god, I think it was Sauron. Or they could have just had that all off camera. Gandalf shows back up at the Battle of Five Armies. They're like, hey, how is the Necromancer? And it's like, graver than I feared. But that's not your concern. They could have kept it subtle and kept it Easter eggy and not just had so much of the focus of this story about Bilbo going with the dwarves, focusing on a villain who's not really directly affecting the story. Look, I swear I'm trying to talk about only what I like about the movies. It's just that the things I like sometimes then go a few steps too far into territory that I don't like, and I really think only a couple of tweaks could have kept them on track. But what you gonna do? Number 2, Riddles in the Dark. This scene is just really done well. Like, they basically just take the text from the book, adapt it pretty faithfully, and just do it really well. It's just, Martin Freeman is a great Bilbo, Andy Serkis is of course a great Gollum, the scene is done with the right amount of tension and humor. It's just a really good production of this chapter. This scene is so good. This whole movie could have been this good, but at least we have this scene.
30 white horses on a red hill. First they champ, then they stamp, then they stand still.
Thief?
And it's technically a little bit later, but as an extension, the pity that stays Bilbo's hand is also handled really well. Like, it's all just communicated visually, like, you see Bilbo, you see him think about stabbing Gollum, you see how pathetic Gollum looks, you see Bilbo change his mind and just make a break for it. It's like, it's so well done. There was so much skill and talent behind this movie, and when it's firing on all cylinders, it's really firing on all cylinders. Riddles in the Dark is the most pivotal chapter of not only The Hobbit, but basically the entire fate of Middle-earth. And if they had screwed this up, it would have been basically unforgivable. I think they knew that, and I think that's why they were extra careful to get this one right. And my number one favorite thing about Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy, Martin Freeman as Bilbo. A perfect casting choice that elevates every scene he's in, which only makes the scenes that don't focus on Bilbo all the more disappointing. But not only is Martin Freeman great as Bilbo, he was literally my first choice for the role. I kid you not, when I saw the Hitchhiker's Guide movie in 2005, I took one look at Martin Freeman as Arthur Dent and thought to myself, that guy should play young Bilbo if they ever do The Hobbit. And then they announced it was actually happening, and I was just so excited, and he didn't disappoint me. When I was talking about my favorite Hobbit adaptation last year, I talked about how as long as you have a good Bilbo, a lot of the rest of it can fall into place. And they have a really good Bilbo here. And then the movie is just weighed down by other stuff that doesn't have to do with Bilbo. And that's why a lot of the fan edits that cut out the extraneous stuff and cut it down to just the story as based on the book, a lot of them work really well. They don't solve all my problems with these movies, but bringing it back to the core does make these movies a lot more enjoyable. And Martin Freeman goes a long way to making these movies as watchable as they are, however watchable that is to you. Martin Freeman is such a good Bilbo, and even though I have plenty of issues with this trilogy, I'm glad I got his performance. Well, that's enough discussion of the Jackson trilogies for this month. Next week, we will be discussing the other movies based on Tolkien's writings. No, not those ones. We covered those last year. I'm talking about the other movies. Brace yourself, this is going to get stranger than you might think. But until then, this is Dave, signing off. Hey everyone, Dave here, and right now I am preoccupied with the other Tolkien movies and TV shows. There's a lot.
Dave's obsession of the moment.
We're all here for Tolkien Adaptation Month because we're celebrating the anniversaries of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies. And last year, I talked about the other Tolkien movies, the animated trilogy. And as far as most fans are concerned, Jackson's 2 trilogies and Warner Brothers' retrofitted trilogy are the 9 Tolkien adaptations that exist. But they were all of them deceived, for there are other Tolkien movies. Mostly foreign movies, and mostly using the word movie incredibly loosely. And the vast majority of these are available on YouTube with English subtitles, and I'll have a playlist to where I found them all at the end of the video, but these are some real interesting takes on Tolkien. So today I am going to discuss all of the other Tolkien motion picture and television adaptations that I've managed to find, and I'm going through them in order of release. Strap in, folks, this is going to be a long one. Our journey begins in 1967. Yes, 1 year before my favorite Hobbit adaptation, there was nobody's favorite. The story behind this adaptation has been documented elsewhere, but the short version is Rembrandt Films bought the film rights to The Hobbit, but had to deliver a full-color film by a certain date. And when the budget for their ambitious project wasn't approved, they just sat on the rights, not expecting to do anything until the sudden uptick in popularity of the books pressured them to make the bare minimum of what the contract would consider a film before they could sell the rights back to Tolkien. So yeah, this is pretty much the Roger Corman Fantastic Four of Tolkien movies, just cheaply rushed out to technically fulfill a contract. But what's the film like itself? Well, it's not very much like The Hobbit, I'll tell you that much.
This is the Arkenstone of old.
Boy, really taking the heart of the mountain literally there.
Suddenly, it was all destroyed by the monster lizard Slag the Terrible.
Yep, they renamed Smaug to Slag because this was before the invention of Urban Dictionary.
Only 3 survived the flames. A watchman who slept when the dragon came creeping.
You had one job! And you look real bored about your failure to fulfill it.
Thorin Oakenshield, general of the now destroyed garrison of Dale.
But he's still keeping his rank even if he has nobody to follow him anymore.
And Princess Mika Milovana.
Ooh, I loved her in The Fifth Element.
Gandalf, whispered General Oakenshield. Only the great wizard Gandalf can help us now.
Oh, you're just saying that because you're desperate to see another character who was actually in the book.
So it has come to pass, said the great wizard, that Dale has been destroyed by Slag, and that he nests on the treasure in the carved halls under Lonely Mountain, just as it is written in the great book.
Okay, fine, I'll read the Silmarillion already.
Then it is clear that the time has come. The time of the Hobbit.
It's the time of the Hobbit for loving. I'm done. So rather than most versions of the story where Gandalf just seems to take a special interest in Bilbo and pushes him to be a burglar, here there is an actual prophecy, not just that the dragon will someday be defeated and the Mountain King will return, but that Bilbo, specifically, will kill the dragon.
You shall lead this group over the impassable barricade mountains, through the impenetrable Mirkwood forest, across the poisonous desolation of Slag, to Lonely Mountain itself, wherein the horrid creature lies. You must creep into the deepest great chamber of the old jewel mines of Dale, and kill the fire-spitting dragon Slag. A fascinating story, said the small hobbit. And now, if you have all finished your breakfasts, it's been a great pleasure to meet you, and I wish you lots of luck and all speed.
Okay, that was a legitimately good comic turn there. This short has its moments.
That dragon has killed my father and all of my people. He has burned to ashes my golden land of Dale. Now he sits on our treasures and waits his time to strike other lands, maybe even here.
No, the Shire's safe from outside world and filmed adaptations. Nothing bad will ever happen to the Shire, no need for any sort of scouring.
If you are all afraid, then I shall go alone. Bilbo was shocked. He shouted at Gandalf, "But this is crazy! She's only a child!"
Oh, I see, that's why they need Bilbo. It's not the prophecy, the princess just needs a babysitter.
The conscripted dragon slayer and the 3 survivors of Dale struggled across the great barricades. Gandalf the Grey watched from his own distance. He knew well what terror waited along this craggy path.
So he'll gladly send the company into danger, but he won't actually be helpful. That depiction of Hobbit Gandalf might be the most faithful part of this adaptation. Anyway, they do the troll scene, except the trolls are called groans for some reason, and Bilbo does the ventriloquism instead of Gandalf, so this is officially the earliest instance of a Hobbit adaptation giving Bilbo more agency than the book gave him. And in the grand scheme of things, this is not a terrible scene to do it in.
As they moved forward again across the great barricades, the survivors had a new opinion of their small hobbit dragon slayer. Perhaps he might prove useful after all, thought Thorin Oakenshield.
Aw, that would mean something if you had shown Thorin doubting Bilbo and not just pleading with him to join the quest.
Suddenly, Bilbo was gone.
Oh, maybe he'll find Balin, Dwalin, Fili, Kili, Oin, Gloin, Ori, Dori, Nori, Beefer, Bofer, and Bomber wherever he is.
Down to the roots of the mountain. Down to where there is none but Ulumu.
Wait, is this where the 1968 radio version picked up that pronunciation from? Did everybody's least favorite adaptation influence my favorite adaptation? Probably not, it's probably just coincidence because basically nobody saw this film, but huh.
A weak and rejected creature found what Gandalf the Grey still seeks, the One Ring of Power.
Spoiler alert, we don't actually see the Ring of Power being powerful in this version of the story, not even turning Bilbo invisible.
Bilbo did have the ring.
See? Perfectly visible.
Magically, the One Ring of Power had found its true bearer.
Is this also part of the prophecy? That only a hobbit can wield the power of the ring? If so, can the Samwise the Strong fantasy come true? Anyway, they have an uneventful trek through Mirkwood, they find the dragon, Bilbo realizes that they need to shoot him with the Arkenstone, which isn't the worst idea for a Chekhov's gun, it's better than whatever Jackson was doing with the Black Arrow, so he bravely steals the Arkenstone with the token note that it might have been the power of the ring that gave him the bravery, but that sounds like a Michael Secret Stuff gambit to me, and they bravely band together to kill the dragon in his sleep.
And so he did it. Just as Gandalf knew he would. And the city of Golden Bells was built again, and Bilbo and Mika reigned there together. But this is crazy. She's only a child.
Well, and that's the first known filmed adaptation of Tolkien. It's an inauspicious start to the legacy of Middle-earth on film, to be sure. As an adaptation, it's truncated at best, completely unfaithful at worst, and as a contractual obligation, its existence is crass, to say the least. But even though it's a cheap scam, I don't hate the stylistic choices. I like Adolf Born's artwork here, and the use of still images and narration brings to mind, like, those videos you'd watch in grade school that have, like, Aesop's Fables or other classic stories. You know the ones I'm talking about, where it'd just be a narrator and illustrations, but it would be on VHS. Am I just old? That's what this feels like, and that's how this works best. You know, if you think of this as The Hobbit, the movie, obviously it's terrible, but if you think of it as like another retelling of a children's story that has been retold and changed and adapted throughout the generations, it feels exactly like that. And if Tolkien's goal was to create a mythology for Europe, a true sign that the goal has succeeded is seeing the mythology get retold and remixed over the years, with different versions of the tales being told in different ways, many being wildly inaccurate to the original tale. So on that front, I like that this exists as a piece of Tolkien ephemera, even if just to fuel the meta-narrative of Lord of the Rings being Europe's mythology. It's just wild that technically, this is the officially licensed animated Hobbit movie, and the Rankin Bass one isn't. That one that so many people love and grew up with, that's just a fan film. But this is the one that's legal. A scam, but a legal scam. Anyway, let's move on to 1971, 6 years before Rankin Bass's The Hobbit, and 7 before Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, for what, as far as I've been able to find, is the first ever filmed adaptation of Fellowship, and the first of many foreign language productions we'll be covering today. A Swedish film called Sagan om Ringen. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it translates to Saga of the Ring. This two-part production for Swedish television was directed by Bo Hansson, based on his own album, music inspired by The Lord of the Rings. So I guess this is technically as much a music video for a concept album as it is a book adaptation. You can kinda tell. It's kind of an abstract visual representation of the story, but it's certainly creative. There are hand-painted backgrounds with the occasional bit of live action blue-screened on, and it also cuts to what appears to be stock footage in the middle. It feels like a kid's show, humans in a cartoon storybook world, like a proto-Blue's Clues or Well, Well, Well with Slim Goodbody. Again, am I just old? There's also no diegetic sound, it's just voiceover narration as we watch silent footage, and, you know, the actors all have an interesting look about them. They all kind of look like they're mumbling their way through something, and the very calm narrator is explaining the world-ending stakes of everything they're discussing.
Ja, Frodo. Ringen du håller i fick den allra största makten. Därför kallas den mästarringen och härskar över dem alla.
Also, despite the chroma key, zero attempt is made to make the hobbits smaller than the other folk, which will be a trend in a lot of these productions.
Mitt under festen gjorde Bilbo sig osynlig.
I like how nobody even notices Bilbo disappearing from his own party. That's the ultimate dream, ghosting a party and nobody cares.
You're looking at the master of leaving parties early.
Who knew Bilbo was both Tim Canterbury and Jim Halpert?
Gjorde sig osynlig med hjälp av en ring han hade hittat en gång. Senare på kvällen gav Bilbo ringen till hoben Frodo i födelsedagspresent.
That is an abnormally large ring. I don't know if they're playing to the cheap seats or if it's like meant to be a prop in a 3D movie.
Så Frodo iväg till rådslaget hos alfkungen Elrond, där alla de olika folken skulle bestämma vad som skulle göras åt ringen. Under vandringen till rådet fick Frodo sällskap av 3 andra hober: Sam, Merry och Pippin.
I'm pretty sure that basically every single filmed adaptation of Fellowship skips the fact that Merry joins up with Frodo, Sam, and Pippin later. Also, the hobbits all appear to be completely different ages, which is not inaccurate, but I don't think Sam should look like everyone else's dad. Despite both parts together totaling less than half an hour, they cover a lot of the journey to Rivendell. They skip Farmer Maggot and the Barrow-wights, but they include Gildor's tribe, Old Man Willow, Tom Bombadil, meeting Aragorn at the Prancing Pony, and they describe the attack at Weathertop in narration, even though they don't show it. And as far as I found, this is the only filmed depiction of Glorfindel.
You don't have to tell me that.
We then get the Council of Elrond, where Gandalf tells about being held by Saruman. We don't see Saruman, but we see Gwaihir, played by stock footage of a real eagle, and we see Gandalf superimposed under him in one very brief shot. Don't blink, you'll miss it. And we see Shadowfax.
Skuggfaxe kallar männen i Rohan honom för. Det bestämdes att 9 personer skulle ge sig av till eldsprutande berget i Mordor och kasta ner ringen i domedagsklyftan. De som skulle följa med Frodo blev Sam, Merry och Pippin och Gandalf. Av alverna valdes Legolas och Gimli gick för dvärgarna och Vidstige för människorna.
That doesn't add up to 9. Did Boromir die already? But in covering basically all of Book 1 and the first 2 chapters of Book 2 in under half an hour, it naturally rushes through points, so there's no time to dwell on characters' emotions or their journey. Basically, the only emotional beats come in the House of Elrond, where Frodo is in awe of how old Elrond and Gandalf are, and when Sam beats himself up for not bringing rope. It's not a very character-driven version of the story. But, you know, it's more faithful to the plot points of its book than the Rembrandt Hobbit was, and it's an interesting look, once again, at the tale being, like, retold throughout the ages. In this case, literally, because this is an adaptation of an album that was inspired by the book. And it's interesting seeing other cultures take on this story. But now let's move back to the English language, and back to The Hobbit, for a 10-part episode of the BBC children's series Jackanory. You know, if you include the opening credits, this is the only Tolkien adaptation to include Babar. Unless he was one of the Oliphants. This was a show that featured actors reading children's stories to the audience to stimulate interest in reading, a sort of precursor to shows like Reading Rainbow and Storytime. Their take on The Hobbit aired in 1979, 2 years after the animated movie. I talked last year about how the text of The Hobbit takes a conversational tone, a tone of someone telling a child a bedtime story, so a show that's literally just actors telling bedtime stories is a good use of the text. The story is narrated by Jan Francis, so that's already more women than Rankin Bass put in their version.
In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole. No, it was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort.
The role of Bilbo was essayed by the late, great Bernard Cribbins, and what a fantastic Bilbo. He doesn't quite surpass Paul Daneman in the radio version as my favorite Bilbo, but he is up there. It's fantastic casting.
Well, first, I should like to know a bit more about things, said Bilbo, so far still tookishly determined to go on with things. Also, I should like to know about risks, out-of-pocket expenses, time required and remuneration, and so forth. By which he meant, what am I going to get out of it, and am I going to come back alive?
The other roles are split between Maurice Denham, who plays Gandalf, among others.
Yes, my dear sir. And I do know your name, Mr. Bilbo Baggins. I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me.
Gandalf? Gandalf, good gracious me! Not the fellow who used to tell such wonderful tales at parties, not the man that used to make such particularly excellent fireworks. Oh, I remember those. I beg your pardon, but I'd no idea you were still in business.
Oh, where else should I be? All the same, I'm pleased to find you remember something about me. Indeed, for your old grandfather Took's sake, I will go so far as to send you to this adventure.
I'm sorry, I don't want any adventures, thank you. Not today. Good morning.
And David Wood, who plays Thorin, among others.
Gandalf, dwarves, and Mr. Baggins. We are met together in the house of our friend and fellow conspirator, this most excellent and audacious hobbit, to discuss our plans, our ways, means, policy, and devices. We shall soon start on a long journey, a journey from which some of us, or perhaps all of us, may never return.
Like I said, this is actors telling a story, not really filming the story. The visual elements are limited to a couple of props and the occasional cutting to the maps. But hey, unlike Rankin Bass 2 years earlier, they got the runes right.
There is one point that you haven't noticed. You see that rune on the west side and the hand pointing to it from the other runes? That marks a hidden passage to the lower halls.
Of course, it does copy Rankin Bass's stupid thing of Bilbo deliberately asking a non-riddle.
And there, he found the ring he'd picked up in the passage and forgotten about.
What have I got in my pocket?
Not fair, not fair. It isn't fair, my precious.
What have I got in my pocket?
It must give us 3 guesses, my precious. 3 guesses.
I was on the fence about whether or not this should even count as a filmed adaptation, since it's more of a filmed, abridged table read. But the thing is, it might be the best filmed adaptation of The Hobbit, at least in terms of faithfulness to the text. And anyway, it's really charming, and I wanted to acknowledge it. These episodes have never been released on home video, reportedly because the Tolkien estate blocked them because they did not want to flood the market with too many different Hobbit home videos. That's what the claim is, anyway. Sure, whatever. Reportedly, it was released on audio tape for home purchase at one point, and it's on YouTube, so, watch it on YouTube. Again, I'll have the playlist at the end of the video. And then, 6 years later, we have the first attempt, to my knowledge, at an actual live-action filmed production of The Hobbit. It's a 1985 Soviet television play whose name translates to The Fabulous Journey of Mr. Bilbo Baggins, the Hobbit, across the wild land, through the dark forest, beyond the misty mountains, there and back again. Nobody can adapt The Hobbit to live action without unnecessarily extending something, even if it's just the title. The low budget is immediately apparent when you look at this thing, but it's not really a movie, not even a made-for-TV movie. It's a televised play, so it's like children's theater sets telling this children's tale, and I think that could work for The Hobbit. And, I think the handcrafted nature of this whole thing does have a certain charm.
Ничего волшебного в хоббитах нет. Они одеваются ярко, башмаков не носят, потому что от природы у них на ногах теплый пушистый мех.
This cross between Sean Connery and Dabney Coleman plays the professor, who is presumably supposed to be Tolkien himself. I kinda love that as a device. Again, the conversational, telling a child a bedtime story tone of The Hobbit's narration lends itself to having an actual narrator. Why not have it be old Tollers himself?
Еще, что в такое дивное утро очень хорошо посидеть и подышать.
Bilbo is played by this Gordon Jump type here, and man, he really hits that exasperated and overwhelmed note hard. I mean, look at the arrival of the dwarf sequence.
Я вижу, наши собираются. Балин к вашим услугам.
Бильбо Беггинс к вашим. Не угодно ли чайку?
Меня больше бы устроил стаканчик кваса, если он у вас найдется. Но не откажусь я и от кекса с изюмом, если вас это не затруднит.
Ничуть.
It's so sitcom-y, just running back and forth, running out of breath. Like, I don't know the reason for Bilbo to take off his scarf when he answers the door and put it back on when he goes back to the dining room, but it is a good bit of business that helps sell how overwhelmed he is. Of course, the visual's kind of overwhelmed too. I can't really see what's going on in these shots of the foyer, but, it's otherwise a very, very effective version of the sequence, I think.
Все-таки приятно, что вы кое-что обо мне помните. Это значит, что вы не совсем безнадежны. И ради вашей матушки я дарю вам то, что вы у меня просите.
Gandalf is played by the older version of Vincent Price's hairdresser disguise from Theater of Blood.
Hello. I'm Butch.
This is a surprisingly sinister take on Gandalf, or at the very least, mischievous. Like, he feels kind of prankish. Like, he is just delighting in how miserable Bilbo is through every part of this journey. It's very weird. Chip the glasses, crack the plates is, if anything, more organized than most versions of it are, but Bilbo still feels overwhelmed, until even he has to get into the spirit of the music. And again, Gandalf is just delighting in how much misery these dwarves are putting this poor hobbit through. Like, did he take special interest in Bilbo just because Gandalf's a bully and this is his chosen victim? We also have another solid version of Misty Mountain's Cold. It might just be a song that it's impossible to get wrong. But after that promising start, then things start to get a little rushed. Not to the point of the Rembrandt Films Hobbit, of course, but things are kinda breezed through pretty quickly. Like, Rivendell is completely skipped, and the trolls, wargs, and eagles are all relegated to Bilbo's dream in the Misty Mountains. But also some of them maybe really happened? Yeah, the play better explain that too, since we only saw it in a dream. Like, they have this narrator, and they have no problem using the narrator to just relay plot points that happened off camera.
Вы спросите, что было дальше. Слушайте.
So why do they need to relegate pretty important plot points to dreams? By the way, Down Down to Goblin Town is not the total jam that Rankin Bass turned it into, but it is still pretty upbeat and accompanied by a ballet from dancers of the Mariinsky Theater. Behold, the Orc of the Dance. Then we meet Gollum, looking for all the world like a Martian ready to be conquered by Santa Claus, but, you know, it's a good children's theater version of Gollum. And then we get Riddles in the Dark.
30 белых коней. Друг другу навстречу помчатся скорей. Ряды их сойдутся, потом разойдутся и мирными станут. До новых затей.
Старье. Зубы, моя прелесть. Зубы. У нас их 6. Вот раз, два, три, 4.
But this production also does the stupid, deliberate non-riddle thing.
Слушай, что у меня в кармане?
Ну, это нечестно.
Почему нечестно?
Потому что нечестно спрашивать меня, что у этого мерзкого Бегинса в кармане.
Нет, ты отвечай, что у меня в кармане.
Is it just me? Does that not bother other people as much? Like, I really think it fundamentally changes Bilbo's character to have him cheat in a riddles game and not just fall backwards into something that works even though it shouldn't. But the big difference they make to Riddles in the Dark, Gollum actually sees Bilbo disappear with the ring.
Да. А в самом деле, что у меня в кармане? А сейчас посмотрим.
Куда он подевался? Мы догадываемся. Это он!
Also, Bilbo seems unsurprised that worked. Like, did he somehow already suspect that this is what a magic ring would do? Also, like Rankin Bass, they skip the pity that stayed Bilbo's hand, which, what you gonna do? They also have Bilbo be way more taunting towards Gollum. And rather than actually follow Gollum out, he just overhears Gollum explain that there is a way out, and, well, that's all the info he needs. And like Rankin Bilbo did with Smaug, he takes the ring off for one last bit of mockery.
Ненавистный! Навсегда ненавистный!
Эй, моя прелесть, прощай и пораскинь мозгами.
Why do so many adaptations think Bilbo's best trait is taunting? And again, like Rankin Bass, we skip Beorn. And since we already had the wargs and the eagles just be in a dream, we go straight from leaving the Misty Mountains to the spiders of Mirkwood, just right outside the cave. And Bilbo's newfound confidence taunting Gollum gives him the confidence to taunt the spiders.
Эй! Жирный паук сгромоздился на сук и не видит меня среди белого дня.
I mean, that's something he actually does do in the book, so I'm fine with it. Then we skip the elves and go straight to Lake Town, where the ballet company returns to dance the prophecies of the Mountain King's return. And this is the first time we're having big folk interact with the dwarves.
Я Торин.
I thought they just weren't going to bother with scale, but I guess Gandalf is a hobbit wizard in this universe. Bilbo goes into Smaug's cave, and I can't tell if he's supposed to be wearing the ring and only we in the audience can see him, or if he straight up forgot to wear the ring. If he's not wearing the ring, since we skipped the elves, he basically does not use the ring at all to help on this journey. Which I guess is kind of like the Rembrandt Films Hobbit. But he finds the misshapen Arkenstone, and then the Smaug puppet appears. It's kind of adorable.
Я тебя чую. Я слышу твое дыхание.
I kind of want to build my own papier-mâché Smaug after seeing this guy. Smaug attacks Lake Town, and there's no thrush in this version, so Bilbo just personally tells Bard about the weak spot, which, at least, he relayed the information somehow, unlike in the Jackson version where just he and Bard found it out separately, and Bilbo finding it out doesn't pay off in any real way. Anyway, Bard deals with Smaug quickly.
Стойте! Сюда приближается войско гоблинов.
Oh man, the ballet troupe is gonna have to fight themselves. So then the battle of some number of armies happens. Gandalf is just real chipper about the whole thing. Bilbo and Thorin have their deathbed reconciliation. Bilbo goes home. It's not a less faithful adaptation than Rankin Bass's, so whichever one you like better probably depends on which visual style you prefer. Or which TV movie you have more personal nostalgia for. 6 years later, in 1991, there was another Soviet television play, completely unrelated, this time based on Fellowship of the Ring. Yes, unrelated Hobbit and Lord of the Rings movies so close to each other isn't just for American animation studios. This is called Cranidoli, or Guardians of the Ring. This aired once on television in the final days of the Soviet Union, and it was thought to be lost until it was uncovered only last year. Which means that there might be other Tolkien adaptations out there that have yet to be uncovered. Boy. No, this video is going to be long enough as it is. I will get to those another time if they ever surface. According to the cast, this was shot in about 9 hours, spread out over the course of a week. That is a really quick time to shoot a Tolkien adaptation. But, you know, I appreciate the effort. It starts out with a lot of footage of black riders and hobbits and a giant foil ring while the ring's poem is put to music. It's abstract and probably confusing if you're unfamiliar with the story, but I kind of dig it. The sets and the locations don't quite mesh with each other, but nothing is as jarring as when it suddenly goes to blue screen. I'm not one to judge when it comes to bad keying, but some of these shots probably didn't need to be keyed.
Сегодня наш рассказ пойдет о хоббитах.
There is once again a narrator, played by the fourth McElroy brother here, but for most of the production he doesn't really narrate. They just keep cutting back to his face for reasons I absolutely cannot fathom.
Спешите, друзья. От задуманного не отступайтесь. К северу, с ветром у левой щеки, с добрым напутствием в сердце. Вставайте. Счастливо! Счастливого пути!
He really loves that pipe, so he could still be Tolkien, just a young, sexy hipster Tolkien.
Долг вел меня навстречу тебе, мой Фродо.
Maybe it's just to remind the audience that this is all a story. I don't know, it's an interesting choice, but I'm going to take it to heart. I'm just going to keep cutting back to myself without making comments.
Мы должны решить, кто отправится дальше, в страну черного властелина, Мордор.
Нет, надо все-таки их разбудить.
Просыпайтесь, просыпайтесь.
Бильбо Торбинсу сегодня исполняется 111 лет. Ведь хоббиты жили долго. И даже в свои 111 Бильбо выглядит, наверное, на 50, не больше. Ведь когда в душе не живет жадность и злоба, тело долго остается молодым.
Well, and when a magic ring unnaturally prolongs your life like butter stretched out over too much bread, but potato. So we start with Bilbo's birthday party, as Bilbo has the greatest mutton chops I've ever seen.
Друзья мои, страшно рад видеть вас здесь, у себя.
Incidentally, this Bilbo is way more patient with Lobelia than most.
Моя кузина, дорогая моя Любелия, рад тебя видеть. Рад тебя видеть.
Бильбо, ты опять расточителен. Сколько ты истратил на угощение? Бильбо.
Любелия, ля кошель, она всегда в твоем репертуаре. Любелия, перестань думать только о содержании моего ля кошеля.
I know you want me dead, you old bat. Now I am charmed by this.
Великий маг и волшебник! Брат мой, я знаю тебя 100 лет, рад тебя видеть.
This is a much more accurate Gandalf than the one in Soviet Hobbit. He's got the silly playfulness, but he still has the solemn seriousness, and he does not seem to be laughing at anyone's misfortune.
Давненько не видал тебя. И вот тебе от меня.
The lack of a budget is readily apparent with the outdoor shots that look like the snowboarding video your friend shot on a VHS camcorder in middle school, and the fireworks of Gandalf's, which are... You couldn't even just find stock footage of actual fireworks in the sky to cut to? Man, this makes Gwahir in that Swedish version look great. In the middle of Bilbo's party, Bilbo and Gandalf slip away for a private talk.
Я делаюсь тонкий-притонкий, как масло на хлебе у скупердяя.
You should probably tell the narrator about that. He thinks your prolonged life is all about your spirit staying free of greed and malice.
День рождения моего племянника Фродо. Ему сегодня 33 года, пора совершеннолетия, и он мой наследник.
Frodo, depending on the angle, looks either like Blackadder or like the lost Kevin McDonald character. The only one who looks more Kids in the Holly is Gollum.
Why won't you let me forget that I have a cabbage for a head?
Отбываю.
Ты кое-что забыл оставить, Бильбо.
Where have I seen that motion before?
Как? И кольцо? Он и его мне оставил. Чего бы это? А впрочем, может пригодится.
Может пригодится, а может и нет.
Shadow of the Past is interesting because Gandalf is like good and solemn, and Frodo is clearly a whirlpool of attention deficit issues, switching from casually whittling to hiding under a pillow with no notable change in temperament.
Кто такой властелин колец?
Черный властелин царит над темными силами.
Мне видеть этого не довелось.
Выбирать судьбу.
This is the wormiest Frodo I have ever seen in my life.
Перед кольцом не умирает, но и не живет по-настоящему. Он просто тянет лямку жизни, без веселья, без радости.
Again, should probably tell the narrator that's what's going on.
Я видел Горлума.
Выкладывай, где ты взял кольцо?
Это мое кольцо, моя прелесть. Да? Мне оно досталось по наследству от бабушки.
От бабушки? Что ты врешь, приятель?
Stop lying to me, pal. Gandalf's like a tough guy shaking someone down for the Corleone family. I love it.
Какие-то новые чудесные друзья. И они покажут, кому надо, где орки зимуют.
Орки, ужас какой, какие орки?
Это враги хоббитов. Это узнаешь.
If their entire role can be reduced to the enemy of your species, Frodo should probably know about them already, pal.
В недрах горы Ородруин. И только там его можно уничтожить. Если, конечно, ты по-настоящему хочешь, чтобы оно исчезло.
Гэндальф, ты так долго рассказываешь, что мне уже есть захотелось.
Come on, Frodo, get a diagnosis already.
Я волшебник. А истребить кольцо может простой хоббит.
So in this version, is this another shoehorned in prophecy? Or is it just that only hobbits have the fortitude to withstand the ring's evil? We're never gonna know.
Только вы двинетесь в путь, вас сразу ждет испытание. Начнется зима.
Man, people were not kidding about George R. R. Martin drawing from Tolkien.
Так, я боюсь холода. В Хоббитане всегда лет, никуда не пойду.
Да, в Хоббитане всегда лето, а в дороге зима.
I feel like the winter is coming thing is just to justify the fact that all the outdoor scenes had snow in them, but none of the on-set scenes had snow in them, so they make that part of the magic of Middle-earth. Okay, work with your limitations.
Пойдут твои друзья.
Мои друзья.
Да, веселый Мэри Бренди Зайк, жалостливый Сэм Скромби, сильный как бык, Пин, Кроу.
Пин, Кроу, сильный как бык.
С ними в путь.
And so the hobbits reenact the Can't Buy Me Love scenes from A Hard Day's Night. Just imagine the mashup yourself. I am not dealing with one of their copyright claims today.
Путь в Забриндию, в трактир Бирюка.
They encounter Farmer Maggot, who, despite being an innkeeper for some reason, is still a more faithful depiction of Farmer Maggot than Jackson gave us.
Слышь, собаки мои истошно лают. Стучится в ворота страшный всадник.
Какой ужас!
Весь в черном. И на черном коне.
Дальше что?
Да все спрашивал. Не знаю ли я, куда ушел Фродо Торбинс из торбы на круче, да 3 его друга? Скажи, мол, где они? Я тебе золото привезу. А сам страшный такой, шипит, хрипит, к земле клонится, будто не живой.
А ты ему что?
А я ему убирайся, говорю. Ничего не знаю, вези свое золото кому захочешь, да я ничего не знаю.
That's right, Maggot. You stand up to that Nazgul. Hell yeah. You're better than both of Peter Jackson's Farmer Maggots put together.
Золото ему не надо. А нам говорил, денежки плати, а?
Да, за еду и питье, конечно, платите. А за предательство и денег не надо. Я честный человек.
I love this Maggot. I want a whole series about him. But alas, we must move on to the Old Forest.
Какой-то опасный путь. Мы идем, чтобы помочь тебе. Кольцо, ты сказал, Мэри, кольцо? Кольцо? Откуда ты знаешь? А что ты думаешь? Мы не в курсе, да я 100 лет назад знал об этом кольце. Еще от самого Бильбо. Только уж если ему хотелось скрытничать, так я и не болтал.
Я знаю про кольцо, да, так получилось, случайно, да.
А когда Гэндальф попросил нас помочь тебе, Мы ему ни слова поперек.
Oh, yeah, we do a quick outdoor conspiracy unmasked, which I'm happy to see, but Gandalf already said the other hobbits would be joining him on the whole journey, so it seems kind of redundant.
Ко сну я засыпаю. Фродо, не спи. Почему? Это не сон. Это сон. Это дурман какой. Нет, брендизовый. Я тоже засыпаю. Я тоже засыпаю, друзья. Засыпаю.
Это
Yes, Old Man Willow bores the hobbits to sleep with an interpretive dance.
Песня! Помощь близко! Ребята, за мной!
Here comes Bombadil, and he seems like a pretty accurate depiction, except for one interesting detail.
Ну что кричать-то, а? Полегче. Я Том Бомбадил, здешних мест хозяин.
Okay, I know that the Russian translations of the book were heavily censored, so did they just not include the line about Bombadil being not quite as big as one of the big folk?
Помочь вам на вашем нелегком пути.
Спасибо.
Покажи мне ваше волшебное кольцо.
It's like they swapped out his hey doll, Mary doll with a fee-fi-fo-fum. Not only are the Bombadils unnecessarily giant, but Goldberry is the Emma Thompson version of Frasier's ex-wife?
Well, I was going to start by singing the Doodlebug song.
I wonder who the Laurie Metcalf version's gonna be.
Лучи моих глаз!
Ah, apparently the Barrow-wight is played by Puddle's Pity Party.
Сейчас, ребятки. Сейчас я вам помогу.
Bombadil saves them from the Barrow-wights by shuffling things around below frame, and he sends them on their quest.
Трактир горцующий пони.
Держит лавр наркиз.
So they get to the Prancing Pony, and Barlam Butterbur appears to just be straight up Basil Fawlty.
Ты пристал к путникам, дай им отдохнуть с дороги.
Мистер. Мистер. Там.
Мистер, я советую вам, отойдите.
Good thing Bernard Cribbins wasn't a hobbit in this one.
He wants to... No!
Frodo here isn't necessarily trying to keep the low profile he should, and in fact he seems desperate to prove everything's fine, so he jumps up and joins in song rather than being pressured into it.
Мне нечего скрывать, я никого не зарезал, никого не убил, никого не ограбил. Давайте веселиться, друзья!
Also, the Brelanders start singing first, so I guess Hey Diddle Diddle isn't a Bilbo original here, it's just a song everybody knows. Makes as much sense as Jackson making it a dwarf standard. God, this poor Bree girl just dealing with wormy Frodo dancing up on her. But rather than just accidentally slip the ring on, Frodo just suddenly feels the pressure of everyone in the room staring at him, including Patchy the pirate. So he deliberately disappears, which is a very different characterization for Frodo.
Что-то не то происходит.
Однако, сударь, довольно вам баловаться с вашей игрушкой.
Barlaman gives the hobbits the note from Gandalf, and Frodo, oh so smoothly, puts Strider to the test.
Уважаемый бродяжник, я сейчас вас проверю. Твое настоящее имя? Ну?
Such a wormy Frodo. So you know how I talked about last week how Jackson amped up the intensity when Frodo was stabbed at Weathertop? He's basically just on death's door between then and the flight to the ford. Well, this version amps up the intensity even more between those points by combining them.
Кольца вы не получите никогда. Я не ваш. Я вам не дамся.
Ветер, я слеза над тобой.
Yeah, Weathertop and the flight to the ford are all like a single incident, and in terms of abridgment, that's an interesting adaptational choice.
Что со мной?
Ты в замке властелина раздола.
Frodo is stabbed with the Morgul blade. He wakes up in the House of Elrond. I think that works as a condension tool. So then we have the Council of Elrond. Boromir's there this time, and
С юга рыцарь Боромир.
he seems to be played by that old friend of Fraser's that John Cleese played.
That's it, I've died and gone to hell.
Why are so many people in Middle-earth either John Cleese, someone from Cheers, or both?
Эльф Леголас.
I'm sorry, is Legolas played by Lori Loughlin?
Соскучился по нему, Фродо.
Lori Loughlin?
Я побывал в замке Скальбург у белого мага Сарумана.
Вот объединиться нам действительно надо. Это верно. Но объединиться за тем, чтобы кольцо всевластия стало нашим.
Oh god, I'm glad this didn't resurface until well after the glory days of Tumblr. The world is not ready for fangirls of young, queer-coded Saruman.
Время прошло.
Перед новой силой бессильны прежние союзы.
Pretty cool that Saruman has the power to provide his own Instagram stickers.
И как же ты спасся, Гэндальф?
Why are you so suspicious, Frodo? This is Gandalf we're talking about.
Мне помог сильнейший из горных орлов ветробой.
Okay, choose your fighter, low-budget Gwahir edition.
Друзья мои, какие будут предложения?
Фродо, я предлагаю вернуться назад.
Вернуться? Мы можем только с победой. Или, по-моему, с поражением.
С позором?
Или с позором.
Ой, нет.
Я предлагаю продвигаться вперед.
Я тоже так думаю.
That's what you were asking, everyone? Do we keep going or go home? That's the big decision you needed help with? God, this fellowship is screwed, aren't they?
Фродо!
Опасность! За нами гонятся волколаки!
As far as I found, this is the only filmed adaptation to include the warg attack by Caradhras, and oh my god, I love these Lunar New Year parade wargs. I want 5 for my own.
Иди, пещера Кардрас, там нас никто не найдет.
Then we get to Moria, and this is where the whole thing kind of just falls apart and gets confusing.
Держись, Фродо, сейчас мы тебе сколько возни с тобой, дружище. Ты как ребенок. Вот таки посмотреть себе не можешь. Весь ты истинно в облаках ищешь.
Дин!
Давай! Держи!
Руку давай!
Да руку давай! Дай руку!
I did not edit any of that. Good luck following along.
А где же Гэндальф?
Yep, no Balrog. Gandalf just fell and he can't get up.
Кто видел последний, Фродо? Неужели он остался в пещере? Эй, боюсь, что он погиб.
I like the automatic assumption that because Gandalf fell out of sight, he must be dead. Aragorn might not exactly be a master of object permanence. Then we arrive in Lothlorien. It's not the same kind of sinister that Jackson made Lothlorien, but it's still kinda sketchy with these elves luring the Fellowship into a creepy sleep.
Вы хотите остановить зло? Это невозможно.
Почему?
Я предсказательница Галадриэль, и я говорю, зло непременно порождает зло.
Frodo looks into the mirror of Galadriel.
Смотри в эту волшебную чашу, но не прикасайся к воде.
Это я, черный властелин Саурон. Я слежу за вами. Отдай мне кольцо, Фродо.
Okay, that one had to be a comedic take on purpose, right? That was supposed to be funny. Just like, hey there, it's me, Sauron. Like, okay, I get that, you know, low budget Eye of Sauron, that's how you're gonna do it. But him self-narrating, like, that had to be played for laughs, right?
Я могу его получить?
Да, конечно. Но ты спасешь нас.
In place of a Dark Lord, you would have the ancient Booer from The Princess Bride.
Никому не могу доверить кольцо. Прощай.
Фродо, вернись.
And then, almost right away, it's the breaking of the Fellowship. Frodo and Sam go off on their merry way. And as far as I know, this production team never went on to do The Two Towers. And that was Guardians of the Ring Russian Breakout, and it is really interesting. There are parts that look like a significant improvement over Soviet Hobbit just 6 years earlier, and then there are parts that look like a significant downgrade from Soviet Hobbit, but it's all just super fascinating seeing this slapdash stage production being filmed of Fellowship of the Ring. I kinda love parts of it, and then other parts are just really hard to watch. Not because, like, it's cringy, like, not because I don't like the earnestness, but just because it's literally difficult to watch. Like, the attempt to do special effects just looks so ugly to me. But there's a lot of other real charm in this movie, and yeah, it's just fascinating. But it doesn't stop there. That same year, 1991, yet a third unrelated Soviet team attempted another animated Hobbit production, but it was never complete.
Много лет тому назад король гномов Трейн-старший, странствуя по Средиземью, открыл эту гору.
Now, I specifically have not been talking about adaptations that weren't made because there are just so many of them. My friends at How Did This Not Get Made covered the broad history, but this one had actual footage leaked and it looks really cool.
Добро и веселье, веселье и смех сияют, улыбки на лицах у всех, и души, как окна, распахнуты настежь.
Sure, it's kind of visually chaotic and overwhelming in certain shots, but look at this stylization, this combination of hand-drawn animation and stop motion and puppetry.
На смену веселью приходит беда, с огнем и мечом никого не щадя. Пока вас 13, вы беспомощны.
Что же нам делать?
Нужен еще один, 14-й.
If this film had been complete, maybe it would have been a complete mess. Maybe it would have been terrible, who knows? But if it had kept up this level of quality through the whole thing, it's possible that this could have been the definitive Hobbit adaptation. Alas, we'll never know, so we can only speculate on what might have been. But now we move on to 2 years later, 1993, for a different television production in a different European country, Finland. This is Hobbitit, or The Hobbits. We've got Tolkien turned into Russian fairy tale movies. We've got Tolkien turned into Finnish fairy tale movies. Before this, my only experience with either Russian or Finnish fairy tale movies was Jack Frost. Now, considering Finnish is one of the primary languages that Tolkien drew from when developing its own, I think it's only right that Finland had its own crack at a Lord of the Rings adaptation. And this was a 9-part television version of Lord of the Rings, based on a 6-hour play that told the story of the whole trilogy, but focused on Frodo and Sam, which means that large battles could be left out, which, you know, not a bad way to do it. So, much like Rankin Bass's Return of the King, this puts all the focus on the 2 hobbits, and also like Rankin Bass's Return of the King, it means they can really focus on their emotions. Don't worry, it's handled better here than it is in Rankin Bass's Return of the King. In fact, the story is narrated by an older Sam, telling the tale to hobbit children. I really like that as a device, even more than I like in-universe Tolkien as a narrator. It makes sense that the hobbit who's keeping up the Red Book of Westmarch would be the one who's telling the tale to future generations.
Hei, sinä et kertonut sanaakaan Frodosta. Niin.
Hänenkin aikansa tulee vielä.
Episode 1 is a little shadow of the past, but it's mostly riddles in the dark. The only major adaptational change to the latter is, much like in the 85 version, Gollum actually sees Bilbo put on the ring. Oh yeah, usually when someone puts on the ring, there's an explosion when they disappear. This might be a nod to Gandalf setting off a firework when Bilbo disappears at the party in the book, but it just happens indiscriminately, which is an odd choice. But unlike the 85 version, or the Rankin Bass production, they keep the pity that stays Bilbo's hand. In fact, Sam really emphasizes it.
Huomatkaa, vaikka Bilbo joutui kiusaukseen surmata klonkkumiekalla, sääli esti häntä toteuttamasta aikeen. Palasi kotiin seikkailultaan kesäkuun 22. päivänä.
I like these establishing shots using scale models. They're really cute. They're a little Thomas the Tank Engine-esque. From the Isle of Sodor to the land of Mordor.
Konnussa tapahtunut mitään ihmeellistä ennen kuin Herra Reppuli aloitti 111. syntymäpäivän.
So then we have Bilbo's birthday, and this older Bilbo doesn't have the button chops, but he sure does have the facial hair of a dwarf.
Vaikka kään tunne teitä puoliakaan niin hyvin kuin pitäisi. Enkä pidä teistä puoliksikaan niin paljon kuin ansaistisitte. Mutta.
Gandalfin maine konnussa perustui siihen, että hän käsitteli niin hyvin tulta ja savuja ja valoja. Mutta hänen todelliset tehtävänsä olivat paitsi vaativampia, niin myös vaarallisempia. Mutta siitä me emme konnussa mitään tienneet. Meillähän oli vain yksi juhlien kohokohdista.
These foreign Gandalfs keep on getting better and better. During the serious moments, this is the most solemn Gandalf we've seen yet, but he also has the warmth and playfulness he needs in his friendship with the hobbits.
Tämä on Herra Sormus. Se sormus, jonka Sauron kadotti kauan sitten. Hän iloitsee sormusta kovin, mutta hänen ei tule sitä saada.
I really like how he plays his temptation by the ring.
Sinä olet viisas ja mahtava. Ota sinä tämä sormus. Älä kiusaa minua.
We were this close to Dark Lord Gandalf, weren't we?
Sormuksen.
Minkäköhän vuoksi? Voi sitä kyllä olla hyötyä.
This Frodo is not nearly as wormy as Soviet Frodo. In fact, he gets pretty gruff.
Onko mitään toivoa, että se ikinä onnistuu? Ja jos onnistuu, onko todennäköistä, että me, sinä ja minä, enää ikinä tarvitsemme leipää?
I think that's supposed to be the power of the ring weighing on him because his voice is getting really close to Gollum's voice. Speaking of Gollum...
Mitä sillä on säästäisissä taskuissa? Me tarvitaan tietää se, mitä sillä on taskussa.
I have not found any confirmation about whether or not Andy Serkis ever saw this production, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did because this is very close to the Gollum we know and love today, other than being played by a live actor in makeup. A live actor who, incidentally, is the same actor who plays Aragorn in this.
Todellakin kutsutaan täällä päin konkariksi, herra Alismäki, mikäli vanha voivalvatti ymmärsin nimenne oikein.
Again, I assume that's a holdover from stage where roles are doubled up, but I'm not sure what the point of doubling up those two characters are. Like, usually in a play, when major roles are doubled up, there's a thematic reason. Like, in most stage productions of Peter Pan, Captain Hook and Mr. Darling are the same actor, but I don't know what we're getting out of Gollum and Aragorn being the same actor, other than they don't have any scenes together. But the guy's good at both of them.
Sormusta ei voi enää piilotella konnussa. Itsesi ja muiden takia sinun on lähdettävä repun päästä.
So the hobbits head to the Old Forest, which, based on the music, seems to be in Eddie Valiant's office. We get Old Man Willow, who swallows the hobbits up using clip art effects. And we get an older, chiller, more mellow Bombadil.
Mikä hätänä, pikkukaverit? Mihin te olet matkalla? Ettekö tunne minua? Olen Tom Bombadil.
And a mostly off-camera Barrow White, which Tom shows up to deal with without the hobbits even singing for help.
Pois häivy haudan haavu. Katoa auringossa.
This Bombadil's not bad, but I feel like the inexplicable Soviet giant is still the most accurate, other than the inexplicable giant part.
Vanhat veitset käyvät hobittikansalle miekoista.
There is one scene that's added that's not in the book and doesn't focus on Frodo and Sam, and I imagine it was a scene added in the play version for a set change or something. We actually do see Gandalf give the letter to Barlam and Butterbur, and it pretty much sets up their dynamic pretty well.
Anna tämä viesti hänelle. Viljami. Muista.
Mikä?
Viesti.
Juu, voit luottaa minuun.
He couldn't. They arrive in Bree, and this features the best depiction of the start of the Hey Diddle Diddle scene, with all of the awkwardness of Frodo pulling attention away to start the song.
Oli vanha iloinen kapakka.
But it still looks like Frodo pretty deliberately puts on the ring for reasons that aren't entirely clear, which I guess it's hard to film the ring accidentally slipping on his finger. What you gonna do? They meet Strider and they continue on their journey.
Sitä paitsi sormus vetää niitä puoleensa.
Eli jos minä liikun, minut nähdään. Jos taas pysyn paikallani,
puoleeni.
Sinä et ole yksin, Frodo.
This Frodo is great. He captures the devastation he feels in the futility of the quest. No matter what choice he makes feels like the wrong one, but he can't just do nothing.
Takaisin Mordorin maahan! Sormusta ette saa!
Much like Soviet Fellowship, this also conflates Weathertop with the flight to the Ford, and yeah, it's just a good, efficient way to do it when you got to abridge things anyway.
Missä minä olen? Rivendellissä. Elrondin talossa.
Gandalf.
Niin. Minä olen täällä.
If I were Frodo, I'd probably be a bit alarmed to be waking up in Rivendell since it looks so much like a low-budget heaven, but hey, time for the council.
Tässä ystävät on se hobitti, Frodo Drogon poika. Harvoin on kukaan koskaan tullut tänne suurempien vaarojen läpi tai tärkeämmässä tehtävässä. Teit hyvin kun tulit.
Unnecessary facial hair aside, I also dig this Elrond. He's not given a whole lot to do, but he has a great presence.
Valtioiden puolesta ja Gimli Gloinin poika kääpiöiden puolesta.
I love how Gimli is just every techie in your college theater department. And now, the moment you have all been waiting for, Samurai Boromir!
Antakaa minulle ensin kertoa Gondorista, sillä totisesti Gondorin maastolle minä tullut. Olisi hyvä kaikkien tietää, että vain meidän uljautemme pitää jo aloillaan idän villit kansat ja Mordorin kauvut puolustusasemissa.
Another thing that the Peter Jackson production may have taken from this is moving the discovery that Frodo's wearing mithril to right after he gets stabbed in Moria and not a little ways after they get out of Moria.
Mitrilpaita. Ota ääreen. Siunattu Bilbo.
Sydämeni iloitsee nähdessäni, että sinulla on moinen sotisopa. Älä riisu sitä edes nukkuessasi.
Ei ole aikaa kummasteluun. Viehenne joka sorkka.
Yeah, there's no need to wonder. We have the answer, Gandalf. Also, much like Soviet Fellowship, there's no Balrog, and Gandalf just kind of seems to slip and fall, which kind of takes away from all that great gravitas we've been seeing from him elsewhere. Still, at least it is confirmation that Gandalf actually fell, unlike Soviet Aragorn just kind of guessing. God, where have I seen that blue screening before? Oh yeah, I myself did it in 2003. Ha, you're gonna have to dig deep back in the Patreon if you want to see any more of that.
Hyvästi, Gandalf. Eikö minä sanonut sinulle, että jos kuljet Morian porteista, niin varo?
Well, you didn't on camera. Then they get to Lothlorien, and Galadriel is the lady in the lake. Or the reflection of the lady in the lake.
Tervetuloa, Aragorn, Arathornin poika.
Galadriel valtiatar.
So Galadriel just lives inside her own mirror? Interesting take.
Enkä minä tule olemaan musta, vaan kaunis ja kauhea, kuin aamu ja yö. Ihana kuin meri, aurinko ja vuorten lumi.
They keep Gimli falling in love with Galadriel, and this Gimli is giving it his all.
Miksi tuli mukaan tätä tehtävää täyttämään? Minulla ei ollut aavistustakaan, missä suurin vaara piili.
But it is kind of the last thing Gimli has to do in this story, and Legolas gets even less to do. No wonder Rankin Bass just cut them all together.
Sinun se on vain onnettoman sattuman kautta. Se olisi voinut olla minun ja sen pitäisi olla minun.
So Samurai Boromir tries to take the ring, so Frodo and Sam go off on their own. Boromir regrets his decision, but is killed, and we actually see Aragorn's personal crisis and self-doubt.
Näin lähtee Boromir. Denethorin perillinen. Mene rauhassa. Tämä on surkea loppu. Saattuin hajalla. Minä olen epäonnistunut. Turhaan luotti Gandalf minuun.
Mene minä nyt.
That's right, give me that vulnerable Aragorn, baby. You know I love it.
Me nostimme taakat harteillemme.
But then we just follow Frodo and Sam for the rest of the story. Narrator Sam just kind of fills in the blanks on what happened off screen.
Merri ja Pippin joutuivat törkkien vangeiksi.
Another thing they do that Jackson would do later is move the discussion about it's a pity Bilbo didn't stab the vile creature to significantly after Shadow of the Past, except they change even more about it.
Sääli, ettei Bilbo pistänyt sitä kuoliaksi.
Sääli. Juuri sääli pidätteli hänen kättään.
Yeah, they give Frodo's lines to Sam and Gandalf's lines to Frodo.
Tuo ansaitsee kuolemaa.
Ansaitsee totisesti. Monet niistä, jotka elävät, ansaitsevat kuoleman. Ja jotkut, jotka kuolevat, ansaitsisivat elämän. Pystytkö sinä, Sam Gamgee, antamaan sen heille?
Having Frodo be the one who imparts this wisdom onto Sam really turns Sam into the true protagonist of this story, and I'm all for that.
Mitä me syödään sitten, kun se loppuu?
Kuulehan nyt, Samwise Gamgee. Rakas pikku hobitti. Ystävien ystävä. Meidän tuskin tarvitsee miettiä, mitä sitten tapahtuu.
Sometimes Frodo's gruffness makes him seem a little impatient with Sam, but he still does actually appreciate Sam. It's a tricky thread.
Mutta sinä unohdit nyt yhden päähenkilön. Samwise sankarimielen.
And yes, their take on Sauron is similar to the Soviet take on Sauron, but not nearly as goofy. I think it does work a lot better here. Faramir is completely skipped, which is better than what Jackson did to him, and much like the Balrog, Shelob is not seen, but she is mentioned by name as being off camera. It's just another scene of confusion as Frodo is clearly poisoned by something.
Sam, pian pakoon. Takaisin. Takaisin.
Yeah, basically the place that this show falls apart is anywhere there's a giant creature. But Sam rescues Frodo, they make their way up the mountain, Gollum attacks them, and because they drove it home so hard before, of course they keep Sam's pity for Gollum.
Olkoon sitten. Häivys siitä. Senkin. Julma haisuli.
Then the actual climax is kind of rushed, but, you know, low budget. So that's just how people fall in this version of Middle-earth, huh? I wonder if they go clockwise in Finland and counterclockwise in New Zealand. Then Sam wakes up in another heaven-looking room to be greeted by someone he thought was dead, but he's as okay with it as anybody could be.
Mä luulin, että sinä olit kuollut. Mitä? Mä luulin, että mä itsekin olin vähän kuollut.
You know, I'm okay with the way they've been rushing through set pieces if it means getting these extended scenes of characters processing their emotions. This series has a grasp on Frodo and Sam that a lot of other adaptations lack.
Tulee mieleen kevät talven jälkeen. Ja aurinko. Ja lehdet ja torvet ja harput ja kaikki hiton laulut, mitä mä olen ikinä kuullut.
It probably comes from the fact that this adaptation was originally written for the stage. It's much easier to do characters processing their emotions on stage than it is to do, big action scenes. And this is what you go to the theater for, to hear characters processing their emotions. Or to see big musical numbers, but this isn't that kind of show.
Kestäkää varmaan viikkokausia ennen kuin me saadaan tästä kaikesta itokaa selvä. Varmasti.
But do you know what the best thing about this production is? Do you want to know? Do you want to know what the best part of this is? They keep the scouring!
Merri puhalsi Rohanin torveen ja ilmoille kajahti Pukinmaan torvimerkki. Ja pian oli koko kylä jalkeilla. Ainakin 100 vantteraa hobittia aseistautuneena kirvein, karakkoin, vasaroin, metsästysjousin ja läheisiltä tiloilta tulvi koko ajan lisää väkeä. Kyläväki oli sytyttänyt soidut ihan vaan huvin vuoksi ja siksi, että johtaja oli sen kieltänyt.
Well, okay, they keep part of it. They don't actually show the hobbits confronting Saruman, but the scouring happens in this version. Is it everything I want from a scouring depiction? No, it's still this low-budget television version based on a play. It's still not perfect, but they have the scouring. As far as I know, this is the only film depiction of the scouring of the Shire. It's not the complete scouring. It's not even like a third of the scouring. I'll take what I can get.
Mutta Frodo ei tullut koskaan entiselleen. Ja eräänä iltana hänen aikansa oli tullut.
So Frodo leaves, but not before taking one more line from Gandalf.
Minä en sano, älä itke. Sillä kaikki kyyneleet eivät ole pahasta.
And we get this I Will Remember You montage, which is kinda cheesy, but shut up, it's working on me.
Länteen päin, on päivä laskussahansa.
And then Sam finishes his story, and then he goes off towards the Undying Lands to be with Frodo. That's a nice way to end this. I like this version. Of course, not everything in it works. Some of the things that don't work are a result of their own limitations. Some of them are just creative choices that I really think are weird. But it's a mostly functional version of the complete trilogy, just skipping over parts Frodo and Sam aren't in. And as far as I can tell, before Jackson came along, this was the only filmed production to finish the trilogy. And including Jackson, it's still the only production to finish the trilogy because it includes the scouring. So, if nothing else, it deserves a lot of credit for that. Then the Jackson movies came along, and people thought doing new takes on Tolkien was a fool's errand when everybody loved those so much. But of course, there was another Tolkien adaptation. Not of his writing, but of the man himself. Yeah, I bet some of you forgot this happened. I kind of did too, and I just watched it an hour ago. Tolkien is a 2019 biopic that was in the English language, but the director is from Finland, so that kinda ties it back to the previous adaptation I was talking about. Kinda. This movie has its moments. The actors are all good, and there are a couple of scenes that I actually really liked, but it's overall just standard schmaltzy biopic fare. And there's a reason that biopic is a genre that now has three essential feature-length parody movies. I think part of the problem is that the things that most Tolkien readers really want to know about his life are things that are inherently uncinematic. Like, we want to learn about him actually crafting the Legendarium. We want to learn about him getting the ideas, writing out, creating this world. And that would just be a guy either sitting at a desk or a guy just having conversations about, I was thinking maybe spiders would be big. The ways this movie does tie in with the Legendarium are having Tolkien basically hallucinate fantasy elements while he's on the battlefield, which I get it as a device, but it's really reductive. Like, everyone knows that Tolkien's time in the war definitely influenced his writing, but the manner and degree to which it influenced his writing is a subject of debate and has been basically since his books were published. And reducing it all to he saw a flamethrower and hallucinated a dragon really does a disservice to, well, everything. The parts I really like in this movie is when Tolkien is having conversations about language, his one true passion.
I think that's nonsense.
I mean, it is if you say it like that.
A word isn't beautiful just because of its sound.
Cellar door.
It's the marriage of sound and meaning. The door to the cellar. A place where something magical and mysterious might happen.
Sorry, have you just dismissed the basis of my entire language?
Your language isn't worth anything unless you remember this important fact.
Oh, is that right?
It is, yes.
But those conversations really harp on the fact that words are beautiful because they have meanings. So when this movie ends with him inventing a word with no explanation for the meaning of that word, now, to be clear, I think it would have been really bad if they had said, oh, he chose the name Hobbit because they reminded him of hobnobs. Like, if they had shoehorned in a fake meaning behind the syllables in the word Hobbit, that would have been bad too. It just sits in sharp contrast with everything else the film was saying about language. But yeah, this movie ends with Old Toller's about to start writing The Hobbit, so it's basically the Walt before Mickey of its time. You don't remember that movie happened either, did you? I'll talk about that another time. I get what they were going for with ending with him writing the famous opening line, but also that is inherently an uncinematic thing to happen because the phrase just popped into his head randomly, seemingly unmotivated by anything other than his own boredom, and that is not a satisfying conclusion to a movie. The film also, takes liberties with Tolkien's life, as all biopics do, and the Tolkien estate put out a statement saying they did not participate in, nor do they endorse this movie. But, they didn't really endorse Jackson's movies either, and everyone loves those, so that's not necessarily a sign of quality. But when you're talking about a man's life, it helps make it feel more authentic if you actually talk to the people who are caretaking that man's legacy. I think the only way to do a Tolkien biopic that would actually give Tolkien fans what they want, like get into his creative process and everything, would be to make it a movie about the Inklings. Have them meeting at the Bird and Baby, have them discussing their processes, discussing their stories, developing their ideas, having them all together. And apparently there was a Tolkien and Lewis biopic that was in development, but it got scrapped before this one came out, so that one probably wouldn't have been great either, but it could have had more of the scenes that Tolkien fans want. But, if you like biopics, this one is fine. Anyway, I guess I should talk about the most recent adaptation. I don't really want to. Not because of the show itself, but because the discourse is frankly exhausting. On the one side, you've got the dumbest people in the world mad that there are some actors who aren't white on the show, or that a girl is a good fighter, and they're yelling at Neil Gaiman about it. Again, dumbest people in the world. On the other side, you have the very legitimate concern that this Tolkien adaptation can only legally use material from some of the books that barely touch on the era the show is set in, so most of the show has to be made up from whole cloth. And that exacerbates the issue you get with any Tolkien adaptation, the fact that all this lore was created by one man, and now a team has to figure out how to filter it to a different medium and capture that man's spirit without that man's input. But on the plus side, you do have the fact that the Tolkien estate worked much more closely with the creators of this adaptation than just about any other Tolkien adaptation, but that's still not the same as the man himself working with the creators of this adaptation. And, oh yeah, then there's the Oliphant in the room that this Tolkien adaptation is being funded by the actual real-life Sharky. This is all the stuff you have to wade through before you even watch the show. Oh my god, this discourse is exhausting. And then, you have the uphill battle of first-time showrunners being tasked with making modern prestige mystery box television and condensing the events of an entire age into a much shorter span of time, when really the best way to cover the Second Age would be an anthology series, so that we can really spread out the time frame and not need to follow the same characters in every episode. We already have plenty of episodes that regular characters don't show up in. This was an option. I mean, basically the entire Harfoot subplot in Season 1 could have been a 2-part episode on its own had it not cut to all the other subplots. Hell, go in the opposite direction. Each race or kingdom of Middle-earth could have gotten its own TV series, but barring that, each season could include like a handful of Numenor episodes, a handful of Moria episodes. Like, there were ways to do this that would cover the vastness of Middle-earth without really compressing it and making it feel so small. But whatever. For whatever reason, these were the decisions that were made. This was the show they were tasked with making. And hey, I talked just last week about how I liked when Jackson compressed the timeline, so compressing the Second Age down to a 5-season arc isn't entirely a deal breaker for me. So I watched the first season of Rings of Power. Do I like the show? I like it enough to wish that I liked it more. There are things that I really enjoy in it. I enjoy the breathtaking vistas, seeing Numenor and Khazad-dûm in their former glory. I like all of the actors, and I like most of the character relationships. I'm legitimately invested in the friendship between Elrond and Durin, and the developing relationship between Arondir and Bronwyn, and the sisterhood between Nori and Poppy, and they're taking care of the stranger, this whole Iron Giant, Frankenstein's monster dynamic they've got going on. I love Adar as a villain. I think he's great. I love the Harfoots, I love the dwarves, I love so much of what's going on, and then there's just so much other stuff that bores or annoys me. I spent the entire season just having zero feelings about Halbrand, good or bad, until the final episode, when the feeling I had was basically, oh. And while I liked seeing Numenor itself, the Numenorians as people seem kinda stupid. Elendil and Miriel are the only ones who seem to have a hint of the Numenorians of legend. I'm sure Isildur will grow into his own, but he's not there yet. I was impressed by the Numenorian landscape, underwhelmed by the Numenorian people. Speaking of growing into their own, I really do dig Warrior Galadriel, but I wish it was tempered with Galadriel's actual wisdom, because boy does she spend most of the season being blinded by revenge, a trait that I could see taking Galadriel for maybe a moment, but not for this long. And I suspect that they're setting up an arc to have her grow into her wise self that we all know, but she should already have more wisdom than this. But there's still a lot of what I love from Tolkien and Tolkien adaptations in the show. Tolkien's often contradictory themes of great men rising to the occasion and small acts from humble people turning the tide are both at play here, and I think they're both handled well. And yes, there are other things that don't feel Tolkien-esque that take me out of it, but that's true of just about every Tolkien adaptation, no matter how good.
Let us hunt some orc.
Ultimately, this first season had some high highs, though not nearly as high as the highs of the Jackson Rings trilogy, and some low lows, though not nearly as low as the lows of the Jackson Hobbit trilogy. I liked it enough to keep watching next season, and I hope it gets even better. I think every single problem that I personally have with the show stems from applying modern sensibilities to this lore. Now, I don't mean making it woke, because if that's legitimately a thing you're complaining about, don't worry, you'll be old enough to get a learner's permit someday. I'm talking modern, capitalistic, studio-driven filmmaking sensibilities, trying to reach all four quadrants, drive engagement, all those good boardroom buzzwords. I'm not definitively saying that the problems were all from studio mandates. Maybe this was the show the writers wanted to make. Maybe it's even the show the Tolkien estate wanted. But the sensibilities that led to these decisions, whoever made them, were influenced by the way modern content is. And as much as I love a lot of modern shows and movies that are made with these same sensibilities, marrying those sensibilities to Tolkien's world felt hollow to me. But that's the cultural landscape this show was made in, just like all these other adaptations were made in their own cultural landscapes, with all the good, the bad, and the confusion that entails. And as such, even if I don't love all the results, or even if I think the attempt itself may have come from a misguided place, I can still appreciate the attempt to filter Tolkien through this lens, just like I can appreciate all these other attempts. Every adaptation I've talked about today brings something different to the table. They were all made by different people for different reasons, and whether influenced by outside forces or from their own creative passion, they all put their own spin on Tolkien. Some of those spins are definitely not the spin I would have put on Tolkien, but it doesn't matter, because the original text is still there. Having more versions of it does not ruin Tolkien. And like I said at the beginning, having all these different interpretations that don't all fit together, don't all make sense together, that just really makes Middle-earth feel like the folklore, like the myth that Tolkien wanted it to be. It makes it feel like a story that has been passed down from generation to generation. Some things have gotten lost in the telling, some things have gotten embellished in the telling, but all of this serves the purpose of making Middle-earth feel real, even if some of these depictions of it feel really fake. And that, as far as I've been able to find, is every other Tolkien movie or television show. That wasn't just made for the internet. I'm not getting into fan films today. I'm tired. Of course, there are other takes on Tolkien, takes that don't even attempt to be reverent, takes that make, dare I say it, fun of Tolkien. And we'll get into those next week. But in the meantime, have you seen any of these? You can watch them all. They are all available either on YouTube or elsewhere. And if you've seen them, what do you think? Which one of these is your favorite? Which one of these do you think is the best? Which one do you think is the worst? Which one is the most baffling? Which is the most interesting? What are your feelings on all these Tolkien takes? And have you found another one that I somehow missed? Let's discuss this all in the comments, and until next week, this is Dave, signing off. Welcome back to Tolkien Adaptation Month, and welcome back to the D-List, the show where I continue to list things and my name still begins with the D. With such a rich world that has endured and captured the hearts of generations, it's no wonder that Middle-earth has been the target of many, many parodies. I've made some myself in my time. Maybe you'll see them someday, as a Throwback Thursday feature on Patreon. But not now. Today I'm talking about parodies that have made me laugh. Parodies that remind me how much fun there's to be had with Tolkien's lore. But first, honorable mention, assorted Dungeons & Dragons episodes of assorted TV shows. These don't fully count as Tolkien parodies, but usually if a show does a Dungeons & Dragons episode, they'll drop at least a handful of Tolkien references. Community did the Galadriel-style intro.
And as a man, he traveled far to a new school and a new beginning. Or so he thought.
The Futurama movie Bender's Game dropped plenty of Tolkien-specific references amidst its general fantasy trope references.
Is that a hobbit over there?
Nah, that's a hobo and a rabbit. But they're making a hobbit.
Notably, they turned the die itself into both the One Ring and the Palantir at the same time, which is probably the most clever part of the special.
There's only one way to destroy it. In the boiling plastic from which it was molded. For we maintain one advantage. The element of surprise.
And the Gravity Falls episode, Dungeons, Dungeons, and More Dungeons, drew from both live-action and animated Tolkien, with a Rankin Bass-esque goblin and an Orlando Bloom-esque elf.
If ye wish to pass, first, ye must complete 7 unworldly quests, each more difficult than the last.
The game is like over. Excelsior whatever.
But the real best of these is the Dungeons, Dungeons, and More Dungeons episode of the Mystery Shack Look Back podcast.
The world has changed. I feel it in the pines. Much that once was is lost, for now few live who remember it.
In a decade past, before the streaming giants ruled the earth, maps were divided by which cable empire provided them coverage.
I might be biased because I'm on that episode. I guess I legally have to review the intro to this very podcast episode because that counts as a Tolkien adaptation.
Oh yeah, you're right. You do.
Charlie and Ella are fun folks. I should host a podcast with them someday. Number 10. The Middle-earth parodies of SNL. Yes, to nobody's surprise, Saturday Night Live did a handful of Middle-earth parodies over the years. Chris Kattan played Gollum on more than one occasion, including interrupting Elijah Wood's monologue to talk about the sitcom they were supposed to star in together. It's not really much of a Tolkien parody, it's just a standard sitcom pastiche using Tolkien characters and homages to mostly Gary Marshall opening credit sequences. See, this one was a missed opportunity because Lord of the Rings, the sitcom, has a lot of sketch potential. They could have gone full Gary Marshall and done Hobbit Days, with Tom Bosley as Bilbo and the young hobbits hang around the Green Dragon instead of Arnold, and then it has the spin-offs. You do Legolas and Gimli working at an ale brewery. Give us any orc, we'll slay them. Read us any rune, we'll say friend. We're gonna make our dreams come true. And then, of course, there's Orc and Mindy. That one writes itself. And finally, Rosie Loves Samwise gets canceled after less than a season. But if you wanted to just do the generic Lord of the Rings characters get an apartment together sitcom, there was a much better setup they could go with there. There's a better setup built into the text. At the end of the story, Frodo, Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel depart from the Grey Havens. They sail west from Middle-earth, which is supposed to be Europe. And where do they arrive? New York City, of course! That's your generic apartment sitcom setup. Anyway, much later when Martin Freeman hosted, they mashed up Tolkien with a very specific sitcom, The Office, Middle-earth. The central game here is, hey, what if Martin Freeman's character was Martin Freeman's other character, but they just nailed the pastiche of the original Office so well.
You seen your ring lately?
No! Where is it? Where is it? Oh, haha, hilarious. Very funny. We're very amused.
Again, it's more of an Office parody than a Tolkien parody, but it works well enough that I love it.
Did the noble thing and turned down loads of treasure. Yeah, so the brave hobbit Bilbo Baggins now works at a paper company, selling paper rings over the phone.
And even though Bobby Moynihan's David Brent is clearly Gandalf, he's also a little Bombadil-ish.
Sexual?
Look, the ring doesn't turn him invisible. Bombadil confirmed.
You can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? Vis-a-vis, a.k.a. for you. To maybe one day end up here. In the hot seat. Lord of the Rings.
I also think it's extra funny knowing that the creators of The Office were not big Tolkien fans.
Right. What do you think of Lord of the Rings? I hate Lord of the Rings. I loathe it. 9 hours of my life wasted. I've watched them all.
I can't believe you watched them all.
Well, it's a family thing. My father suggested on the first one we go and watch it.
I watched the first one. I thought that's all right. But once you've seen one orc, you've seen them all.
Oh.
It's okay. I still love you, Stephen Merchant. And Ricky's there too. Earlier, SNL parodied The Hobbit's unnecessary trilogization with the More Hobbit sketch, which is probably the better movie parody because it's actually, making a statement about the movies.
Plus, Hobbit 4, Apple Maps, an unexpected detour.
It says that there's supposed to be a Quiznos right here, but this is definitely Mordor.
And it severely underuses a perfectly cast Tim Robinson as Ori.
Oh, is it walking?
Oh, also in 2014 there was this bit of inexplicable nonsense.
And now, Legolas from The Hobbit tries to order a Taco Bell.
I have no memory of this place. Good day.
Welcome to Taco Bell. May I take your order, please?
A red sun rises. Blood has been spilled this night.
Nah, man, that's just sauce over there.
Oh, I'll take 2 beef chalupas.
It's an utterly pointless one-joke sketch, but it revels in how utterly pointless it is, so as far as silly nonsense goes, I kinda dig it.
Funny! I thought I would never dine with an elf!
Then how about dining with a friend?
That I can do.
But I still think Hobbit Office is the stronger sketch, if only because, again, they just really, really, really nailed The Office. Number 9. The Ring and I. Much like Saturday Night Live, Mad Magazine is no stranger to Lord of the Rings parodies. Naturally, they covered the Jackson movies, but my favorite of their Tolkien takes comes from decades earlier, a 1979 Lord of the Rings musical called The Ring and I.
I've got the ring which puts me in a tough spot. I've got the ring, without it there's no plot. I've got the ring, I've got the ring.
Visually, this comic draws a lot from the Bakshi movie, making up for his refusal to include songs for the sake of a soundtrack album.
Till I gets back, my precious. My lovely precious is the ring, which I love like anything. Till a thief came by to rob it. 'Twas a double-crossing hobbit. They might not all be the cleverest parody lyrics in the world, but remember, this was a pre-Weird Al time. You learn the truth when you're a tree, that life's one long catastrophe, with squirrels running down your trunk and dropping nuts and other junk.
And I like how the comic acknowledges Tolkien's influence on so much of pop culture. They had no idea how right they would be about that over the years. Number 8. Frodo Don't Wear the Ring by Flight of the Conchords. I don't know if this is one of my top 10 Flight of the Conchords songs. It doesn't have as many jokes as most of their songs. It's got a few good ones, though.
We'll never make it. There's thousands of them and only 9 of us. Oh, we made it.
But I really like the music in all the styles they bounce between, and it's worth acknowledging because it's a Lord of the Rings parody made by somebody who was in Lord of the Rings.
My lady.
And someone who would later voice a Lord of the Rings character in Lego Batman. And come on, who wouldn't want to see a full adaptation with Eugene Merman as Saruman and Kristen Schaal as Arwen, and of course that sweetheart of the high seas, Rhys Darby as Gandalf?
Look a bit more afraid, okay? Don't be scared of the dirt on your feet, Brett.
There's condoms around here, used condoms.
It is funny that this is the parody made by New Zealanders, but not made in New Zealand.
Something I've got to tell you about the video.
I know. That it's the best thing I've ever done in my life, right?
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
The specter of Lord of the Rings kind of hangs over New Zealand throughout the entire Flight of the Conchords series, so it was about time they actually tackled it directly. Number 7.
With apologies to J.R.R. Tolkien, hot off the presses, bored of the ring.
If you've only heard about one Lord of the Rings parody in your life, it's very likely this one. Written by Doug Kenny and Henry Beard while they were at the Harvard Lampoon, before they founded the National One, Lord of the Rings is probably the only parody on this list considered by many to be an essential piece of Tolkien ephemera.
Though we cannot with complete candor state, as does Professor T, that the tale grew in the telling, we can allow that this tale, or rather the necessity of hawking it at a bean a copy, grew in direct proportion to the ominous dwindling of our bank accounts at the Harvard Trust in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
It's a 10-chapter-long comic novel that honestly spoofs most of the story. Not every single element, but a lot considering it's so much shorter than the actual book.
Stumped at last for a riddle to ask, he cried out, as his hand fell on his snub-nosed .38, "What have I got in my pocket?" This Goddam failed to answer. He would have finished Goddam off then and there, but pity stayed his hand. "It's a pity I've run out of bullets," he thought.
It also spoofs the culture of the time, especially the hippie culture that lashed on so hard to Lord of the Rings in this era.
"Will you join us?" Tim shook his hair.
No, don't bug me, man. I'm a consciential objector. Don't want no more war. Came here to dodge draft, see? If some cat wants to kick the stuffing out of me, I say, groovy. And I give him flour and love beads. Love, I say to him. No more war, I say. Anyway, I 4F.
"No more guts," growled Spam under his breath to Moxie.
No, I got guts,
said Tim, pointing to his temple.
No more brains.
And then it also just has other pop culture references of the day, but, you know, it just throws a lot of jokes at you. It even parodies the books themselves, like not just the story, but like it's got the maps, it's got, you know, Tolkien's prose, it's got the prologue. It doesn't have the appendices, but, you know, they admit that they were doing this lazily, you know, considering they're calling it lazy, they do a lot more than they can. And it just parodies books in general, because there's like a tease for a sex scene that's not actually in the story in the opening pages. It does a lot with a little. The cynical motivations for writing this are laid out pretty plainly in the introduction, and that cynical tone remains throughout the text.
Prologue. Concerning boggies. This book is predominantly concerned with making money, and from its pages, a listener may learn much about the character and the literary integrity of the authors. Of boggies, however, he will discover next to nothing.
Tolkien's loving descriptions of the lands and peoples of Middle-earth are replaced with harsh insults, and the peoples of this realm are portrayed completely unflatteringly. The Rohirrim are straight-up Nazis in this thing.
Tall and blond were the Roy Tanners, wearers of helmets topped with cruel-looking spikes and small toothbrush mustaches. The wanderers saw, too, that they wore long boots and short leathern pants with suspenders, and held long pikes that looked like lead-weighted dust mops.
Also, a lot of the references that were current at the time have been lost to the ages. So in 2012, a new edition was published to cash in on the Hobbit trilogy, with a new foreword by Henry Beard, and with footnotes explaining some of the references that audiences might not get anymore. But to make up for the fact that they have to explain the joke, these explanations all contain new jokes.
Dildo Bugger set out one day with a band of demented dwarves and a discredited Rosicrucian named Goodgulf to separate a dragon from his horde of short-term municipals and convertible debentures. Note, the Rosicrucian Order is a philosophical secret society. Rosicrucianism directly influenced the Freemasons and the Cool Guys Treehouse Club. Good Gulf was a premium gasoline offered by Gulf Oil, which fell out of popularity once arson became illegal.
So I'm sure decades from now we'll have a new edition where these footnotes have their own footnotes to explain their jokes.
It's no longer safe to follow the turnpath to Hui. We'll have to take the shortcut through the Evelyn Wood. Note, Evelyn Wood was an American teacher who invented the practice of speed reading to help people absorb books faster. SparkNotes later perfected this with the invention of not reading.
Not every joke in this lands. Some of them haven't aged well. It was, after all, written by rich white men in the 60s. And some of the jokes are just corny puns.
What is it about filling 200 pages with atrocious Lord of the Rings puns that feels so right and yet Sauron?
But no matter what, it deserves a mention on this list just for being the one that started it all, and having a title that countless other parodies stole.
As for any inner meanings or message, as Professor T said in his foreword, there is none herein, except that which you may read into it yourself. Hint. What did P.T. Barnum say was born every minute?
This is noteworthy not only as a Tolkien parody, but as a work of parody in general. It has remained in print for over 4 decades, and it's been translated into a dozen languages. The book is mostly puns. Somebody had to translate the puns.
I'm sorry, once I start punning about these little guys, it's tough to kick the Hobbit.
This thing will never go out of print, and that's impressive for a spoof novel. Number 6. Almost There and Back Again. I said I wasn't getting into fan films last week, but I'll get into one now. Almost There and Back Again is a mockumentary from a group called Haynes Film, led by director Peter Haynes. Haynes Film had made a few Star Wars fan films, including a short film called Fanboys, about a group trying to steal a work print of The Phantom Menace. A good 6 years before that Dan Fogler movie ripped off that basic premise and title with a far inferior version, and Feel the Force, a hilarious mockumentary about a group of Jedi street preachers.
We talk about the Force, talk about Yoda. If anybody has any queries or questions, they ask Yoda, and we sing our songs.
I met him in a swamp down in Dagobah.
But being New Zealanders, this group had to tackle Tolkien sooner or later, and much like with Star Wars, they didn't turn their eye to the fiction, but to the fandom.
We're going to walk the length of New Zealand, dressed entirely in full costume.
Yes, this mockumentary focuses on the team playing exaggerated versions of themselves, LARPing the walk across Middle-earth by walking across New Zealand, and some of them are taking it way more seriously than others.
What the hell are you wearing? I'm Barrymore, you know, from the movie. Which bloody movie? The Lord of the Rings, the Ralph Bakshi version, the cartoon. You're walking a fine line, mate, a fine line. I put a lot of effort into this. You could at least say thank you. You shall not pass!
And as the madness sets in, some of the participants start to become the characters they're playing.
That one counts as mine.
Like the Boromir analog wants to abandon the quest and do something more fun, and he even tempts Frodo to do the same.
Take it you're enjoying this game.
This is no game.
I think I think you're enjoying it a little bit too much. Tell you what, next time we come across like a road or something, let's just, you and I just hop on it, follow it, until we get to McDonald's. I'll sit you down, you can have a cheeseburger, bottle of Coke, whatever you like.
The Frodo analog himself starts to become lost, not to the ring, but to his own method acting.
Maybe we should sort of get out of each other's way a bit, because you're kind of freaky.
You promised to protect me, Sam.
Oh, yeah.
You're always a kidder.
I'm just not sure how to protect you from myself.
and it doesn't take long for this fellowship to break. It's a really funny short, it's worth checking out. Number 5. The Adventures of Edward the Less. Mystery Science Theater 3000 made no shortage of Tolkien references over its run.
Hey doll, derry doll, tom bombadillo.
And a few years after Sci-Fi Channel ended the original run of the show, Sci-Fi.com brought the team from the final seasons back for a new project called The Adventures of Edward the Less, in anticipation of the Jackson trilogy.
Episode 1, A Long, Annoying Party. In the realm of the lighter area, under the shadow of the mountains of loose rocks, nestled in the Pudgelands, is the hamlet of Pushington Downs.
Yes, this was that weird era where real networks were trying to figure out how to do web series, but YouTube and streaming services didn't exist yet, so you had really low-res things that had to be watched on, like, Real Player. Dark times.
A dark figure sat alone in a dark cave, awaiting a dark summons from his dark oracle, next to his dark chair.
Bill Corbett plays the titular Edward, an extremely grumpy take on Frodo, and Kevin Murphy plays Soapy, an exceptionally bumbling Samwise pastiche.
Sir, hadn't we better get back to the feast? You are the guest of honor.
They'll never miss me. All they want is an excuse to run around being adorable, eating their buttered crow pies and singing songs with the word twiddle in them.
And then Mike shows up as the noble one, who's part Legolas, part Aragorn, but really just a combination of all the noble big people.
And so, for lo, these many thousands of years, around have we stood, nobly waiting to fulfill our destiny. We are the Round Standers.
While the directions that the story goes in don't all parody Tolkien directly, there's a lot of very specific beats that get spoofed.
Give me your ring.
Okay, but only if you'll go away.
With great dramatic flair, Primatine cast Edward's ring into the hottest part of the fire.
Hey, that's my Button Maker of the Month ring.
I say to you that if your ring withstands the fire unscathed, then it will be revealed as lo, a ring of power. And behold, your ring has melted away completely.
So it wasn't a ring of power.
No.
And if I didn't know better, I'd swear this was partially a parody of the Rembrandt film's Hobbit, using still images and shoehorning in a prophecy. I know basically nobody in the world had seen that film at this time, and yet I wouldn't put it past the Best Brains team to have somehow heard about that film while it was lost to the ages.
Okay, humor me. Why do I need to throw the token into the crater of despair?
Because you are the one spoken of in the sacred prophecy.
Yeah, and about this prophecy...
The prophecy states you must destroy the mighty token.
Right, and the mighty token must be destroyed because...
Well, because it is spoken of in the prophecy.
See, am I the only one here who thinks this is kind of stupid?
The season ends on a cliffhanger, and then there was never a season 2. I don't know if there was ever seriously going to be a season 2, or if the cliffhanger ending was just a joke. But either way, this is a fascinating project that's fun to revisit from the time between the original MST3K and Riff Tracks. Number 4. Stealing Like a Hobbit by the great Luke Ski. Okay, so I might be biased here because Luke is a friend of mine, but even before I knew him personally, I loved this parody.
I said I'm sorry, Gollum. I never meant to hurt you. But you can kiss that ring bye-bye, 'cause tonight I'm stealing like a hobbit.
This is a parody of Eminem's Cleaning Out My Closet, with also little bits that parody Lose Yourself and a bit that parodies Stan.
Sing songs about us across the land, just you and me. Hit me back, your biggest fan. This is Sam.
And by extension parodies Thank You. It summarizes a bit of Fellowship and a bit of Two Towers, and fitting a plot summary into Eminem's scansion, that is a challenge, but Luke has a gift.
And all the men again will die some more. I'll fork on Doran, Boromir's Mora. He's only human, he went mad enough for Mordor to score.
Luke just has a knack for little turns of phrase that just always stick with me and just always make me smile. Number 3. Tolkien freaks out over Hobbit milk. Yes, much like last week, I'm also including a take on the man himself. In this monologue from a UCB show, Graham Techler plays Tolkien, upset at a major cut his editor made to the story.
Where's the Hobbit milk, Jacob? You heard me, bitch! Where's the Hobbit milk? The milk! The milk the hobbits have! The milk they're full of! You cut the Hobbit milk! Every other page I turn expecting to see, oh, here's where the hobbits milk Bilbo for his birthday. Oh, no, here's where the Fellowship takes a second breakfast of hobbit's milk. Oh, here's where they finally drown Gollum in 2% hobbit's milk. But no!
Okay, so obviously the specifics are absurd, and obviously he's a yelling American and not a grumpy, befuddled British man. But honestly, this is not a wholly inaccurate portrayal of Tolkien.
What happened to my maps?
Just the part where, like, Tolkien really wants to focus on stuff that his publisher thinks is completely unpublishable. Like, if you just substitute Hobbit milk with Silmarils, this is basically what really happened in real life.
Sing me the song of Bonfong, then. Song of Bonfong. You know it, chapter 12. Once I sat with Bonfong, his belly fat and round. No? I said, good sir, your hobbit's milk's the best in all the town. We splashed and splashed and splashed and splashed, we splashed the day away, with hobbit's milk exploding out his nipples, oh hooray! So, I did a do, I did a dee, I did a you, I did a me, I did a him, I did a she, that's how my hobbit milked me, I want to kill you.
Even the punchline has some truth to it.
If I tried to boss my mother around like this, she would have given me 3 extra spanks with the milk pail and said, go fetch more milk, J.R.R. Tolkien, otherwise it's your fault we're poor. Oh.
As much as Tolkien hated allegory, his own trauma did creep its way into his writing. He was bitten by a spider at a young age. They didn't show that in the biopic, but it happened. Number 2. VeggieTales, Lord of the Beans. Yes, as with so many other pop culture behemoths, Lord of the Rings was given the VeggieTales treatment.
Odo Baggy Pants, I am never late. I arrive precisely when I intend to. Oh my.
Now, obviously, this had to be built around a Sunday school lesson, but it's a fairly secular Sunday school lesson. And it flies in the face of the prosperity gospel, so that's always good.
Use your gift to help people. How quaint! I hope you've learned your lesson, boy. Life is short. If you have a gift, use it for yourself before you've lost it and it's too late.
Yeah, the translation of the story into a story for preschoolers means that the story doesn't fully track for adults. But as a Tolkien parody, there's a lot in here that I love.
What was that? Oh, there's a bird. Let's jump on him. Maybe he'll fly us wherever we want to go. Maybe he'll serve us drinks and little bags of peanuts. Get your own ride.
Not every single joke lands, but a lot more of them land than I would have expected at this point after Lord of the Rings had already been parodied so many times. They managed to parody specific turns of phrase, some of which I had thought would be unspoofable.
I'm twice as tall as half of you and half as short as twice of you.
And Mr. Lunt's Gollum parody character, it's just such a simple joke, but such a perfect joke.
I am named for the sound I make with my throat. Ahem? Yes, what do you want?
Your name is Ahem?
My name is Ahem.
Also, apparently the internet has decided that this character is Tom Bombadil.
I'm a lucky boy. I've got a new umbrella, and it's me pride and joy. When the rain may come and the sun may go, I'll be warm and dry from me head to toe. I'm a lucky fella. I'm a lucky boy.
I haven't found official confirmation that this is the intention. He doesn't really fit the same role in the story or match any specific descriptors of Tom, but hey, I like that theory, and I think it's funny to say that VeggieTales has the only English language film depiction of Bombadil so far, so I'm on board.
I've got a new umbrella!
But if that counts as Bombadil, then I'm counting the end of the story as doing the scouring of the Shire. I know it's not in the Shire, but I'm counting it.
I want to fix this land!
Also, I gotta shout out this episode's Silly Songs with Larry.
And now it's time for Silly Songs with Elves, the part of the show where Iricorn comes out and sings a silly song for elves.
Okay, the elves Elvis pun has been done many times before.
Hey, a story about Elvis?
And I'm pretty sure this whole gag is just building up to this pun.
You're no elf! You're an Elvis impersonator!
But is it possible that there's more to this? Is it possible that Larry faking elvenhood for the sake of a silly song is both a light jab at Elvis himself taking his style from a culture that was not his, and a reference to Aragorn's obsession with elvenkind, to the point of caring more for the world of elves than he seems to care for his own people at various points in the films? Probably not. I'm probably reading way too much into this, but hey, it makes it even funnier. Anyway, the song is catchy.
Shook her head, and this is what she said.
I mean, for years I was hoping VeggieTales would eventually do Gourd of the Rings, but you know, this works too. And my number one favorite Lord of the Rings parody, Lord of the Rings, the complete 1944 film. I mentioned this last year, but this is just one of the many bits of brilliance from the Tolkien Sarcasm page, a website full of snark and silliness about all things Tolkien. Seriously, this thing is like a treasure trove of Tolkien spoofs. I could have populated the entire list just with things from this website, but number one with the bullet, my favorite part of this website is this film. Basically, this re-edits classic movies to imagine what a 1944 version of Lord of the Rings would look like, starring Humphrey Bogart as Frodo.
What is it, Gandalf?
Sidney Greenstreet as Gandalf.
Big ads, Frodo. You are one remarkable hobbit.
Dooley Wilson as Sam, again.
And the road goes ever on, and onward from the dawn.
Orson Welles as Saruman, although it also could be Boromir.
Don't you think you ought to give the ring to me?
Not while I'm breathing, Saruman.
Marlena Dietrich as Galadriel.
You are a wise lady. I would give you the ring if you want it.
Get out.
And Peter Lorre in the most perfect piece of casting that has ever happened in cinema.
You have something very precious to me, and to you too.
Also Godzilla as the Balrog.
Get out of my way, you flame of Udun.
What's great about this is how accurate it is. Not to the text of Lord of the Rings, but to what this movie of Lord of the Rings would have been like. Like, if film noir filmmakers had been adapting fantasy stories instead of just dime store detective novels, these are the exact changes they would make to the story.
Stay out of Mordor.
Oh.
It's like just recognizable enough as the things you recognize from the book, except then completely skewed, not just by being modernized, but also just by being changed, making Frodo more of a film noir hero. It's just, oh, it's so pitch perfect.
Well, thanks, Elrond.
Well, it's been my pleasure to help, Frodo. Good luck with the quest.
Thanks.
And then in the ending, it completely goes off the rails, partially probably due to the limitations of having to use real footage of these actors, but also just because, yeah, that is how they would change the ending in this sort of a movie.
I don't think so. I think we're close enough from here.
How?
And this thing predates YouTube. I remember having to download this on dial-up. It took forever. It was worth the wait.
Excellent work, Frodo. We've defeated Sauron, and now everyone can have happy lives forever.
To this day, this thing makes me laugh like almost nothing else. I love it.
I just wish I could forget.
And there you have it, my favorite Tolkien spoofs. At least that I can remember right now. There are so many that I may have forgotten some great ones. Do you have some that you love that I didn't cover here? Tell me all about them in the comments, and man, all this Tolkien spoofery has got me itching to dip my toes in that well again. It's got me really wanting to make my own Middle-earth parody sketch again. Good thing I've already been working on one for a while. In fact, you've already seen parts of it. Let's go finish that up, shall we? Let me into the group there, you!
For the last time, you're technically in the movie. You don't belong here. Love you, honey. I'll see you at home. All right. Welcome to the support group for Lord of the Rings characters left out of the movies.
Wonderful. Let's dance.
Let's! Hold on. I need to call roll. Okay. Old Rory?
Yes, I'm here.
Esmeralda? Present. Bob?
Yep.
Knob?
Bree Hobbits representing. The movie acting like Bree was some inhospitable place completely unaccommodating to hobbits, as if it wasn't a cultural haven where the big folk and little folk can live together.
The movie had the right idea. Bree could do without you rotten little half-pints running amok.
Oh, shut up, pony abuser.
Quick beam?
Yes, I'm here. It's me. I'm here, and I'm ready, and I'm here, and I'm ready to go, and I'm here, and I'm here to go, and I'm ready for us all to go. Come on, slowpokes, let's get this started.
Yes, let's.
Hold up. Imrahil?
At your service.
Baragond?
I am here. I have no duty this morning.
That talking fox that found the hobbits sleeping in the woods near the beginning of their journey?
Frankly, I'm surprised I even made it into the book. I feel almost too childish for The Hobbit.
Really? The Hobbit had a talking purse.
I said almost.
Moving on. Halbarad?
Present.
Gone, baby, gone?
Ishanbury leader of the Druidine. I got caught, and now the only wild men in the movie are those treacherous Dunlendings pledging themselves to Saruman. No positive representation for wild men at all in these movies.
Yes, but let's not pretend like representation has ever been the story's strong point. Moving on. Eladan?
Yes.
Aro here?
Hello.
Why am I glad we're wearing name tags? Yorith?
Yes, I'm here, and here at last am I. I was saying just the other day, it's strange, is it not, that my whole Kingsfoil exchange was given to Samwise in movie 1, and I was left completely to the curb. I was the one who reminded everyone that the hands of a king are the hands of a healer, but no such things exist in this film world. And then yesterday,
Yes. Where is young Sancho Proudfoot?
He's digging for treasure out in the parking lot.
And Lotho Sackville Baggins?
I don't know, probably off aligning with some wizard who will kill him later.
I'll dance to that.
Me too.
Hold up. Or is here gone?
I think he's dead. I passed a body on the way here that was missing its head, but it's probably him.
You are really cavalier about that.
Look, it's a miracle any of us minor characters live past 30.
Okay. Eothane?
I am here.
Wait, you don't need to be here. You were mentioned by name in the movie.
My name was mentioned, but I was not mentioned by name, because that was not me. They gave my name to a child. A child! I am a rider of Rohan. I am Aemir's closest confidant, his second in command, and they gave my name to a scared little boy.
Okay. No need to be rude.
To say I was in the film. I will not sit here and suffer this slanderous besmirchment at the hands of a little person from old songs and children's tales out of the north.
We get it. You hate short people.
You want to talk about ignored labor? I've been keeping these halflings safe without them even knowing it. And now, the movie-going audience is not going to know it either. And yet, I grudge it not.
You sure sounds like you kinda grudge it.
I grudge it not. No grudging here.
That sounds like grudging, doesn't it?
It does indeed sound like grudging.
I grudge it not.
Okay. Glorfindel? Everything all right?
Oh, he's been pissed about this longer than the rest of us. He's still mad about the cartoon.
Look, I'm not upset about getting replaced by Arwen in the movies. I get it. She's great. She's the freaking even star, and she's the big romantic lead, so let's increase her role. Fine. Arwen's great.
Yeah, everyone loves our little sister. Oh, hush.
But the stupid cartoon replaces me with Legolas, a freaking wood elf. Do you think that all elven subcultures are just interchangeable, Bakshi? You can't just go and replace a Noldor with a Sindar willy-nilly. The only reason he was in Rivendell was to apologize because he lost Gollum. But sure, give him my role. I died in the First Age and was resurrected. But sure, let the trust fund kid from Mirkwood take over. God, just give all my glory to the guy who already happens to be in the story.
Hey, at least you weren't replaced by the same guy twice.
Where's Radagast?
He's in a different support group for characters who were shoehorned into the Hobbit films. Lucky bastard.
Where's Fredgar Fatty Bulger? Oh, he actually is in the movie. Bilbo Baggins addresses him by name at his birthday party. He just says it kind of quiet. It's hard to hear. So, he's off creating his own support group for Tolkien characters whose names sound more like PG Roadhouse characters.
So, that makes him and who else?
Yes, so it's mainly just him right now, but he's trying to recruit Gaffer Gamgee as well.
Old Mad Bulger off on another adventure again.
You say that about everyone.
He's off and he's no good.
That is not true. He brought you this bottle of Old Wynyard.
Capital value, old Bulger, I've always said.
Exactly.
Where's Gildor?
Oh, he thinks he's in the extended edition.
Where?
Those elves that Frodo and Sam see in the woods.
Doesn't Frodo say they're wood elves? He's not a wood elf either.
You don't have to tell me that.
So he thinks one of those extras is him, even though there's none of the conversation, or singing, or merrymaking.
It's about as accurate a depiction as they gave your husband.
Fair. Where are Aristor and Galdor?
They also think they're in the movie. They're both convinced Brett McKenzie plays them.
I thought Brett McKenzie played Lindir.
That's what we said. That's who he played in the Hobbit trilogy. They think that in the original trilogy, the role is open.
Fine. Where's Ingold? Elfhelm? Mablung?
They're all convinced they're extras. Oh, for goodness sake, we can all point to extras in the movie that might be us.
Well, most folks here can.
The collectible card game claims some random extra was me, but you don't hear me bragging about being there.
Well, what about us?
You can't prove that we're not at Bilbo's party in the movies.
Hey, maybe one of those wargs that attacked on the way to Helm's Deep was actually a fox? Maybe?
I mean, I suppose a less emotionally secure character could point to an extra and claim that's supposed to be them, but none of those riders were watching his back the way I do. There's only one Eothane, and he is not a child. Anymore.
Perhaps it's a good thing I got cut. Did you see what they did to my in-laws? Not pretty.
I actually was supposed to be in the movie. I cast a fellow named Ian Hughes to play me, but then in post-production they changed his name to Erolos.
Erolos, isn't that your brother's name?
No, my brother's name is Eorlos, but it's very close.
At least you almost got acknowledged, Dad.
Go home, Beargill. It's past your bedtime.
No other Hobbits seen in Bree. We're not there.
Stupid Emma.
Maybe that ant on fire is me. He dumps his head in the water pretty quickly. Is he quick enough to be me?
That out-of-focus lady leading Aragorn through the houses of Hela in the extended edition is definitely supposed to be me, but I'm not counting it. Why? Because she hasn't got any lines. My entire main character trait is babbling on and on about nothing in particular, answering simple questions with personal details, possibly being a slightly misogynistic stereotype of an old nursemaid, and then talking on and on until I get finally cut off by...
Okay. I am just going to assume that anyone who is not here thinks that they are supposed to be played by some extra in the movies. And you know what? More power to them. We all do what we can to cope.
Surely that can't be true of everyone.
Huh?
Where's...
No. Everyone else is accounted for. Everyone else who cannot possibly be represented by a background character in a film is accounted for.
What about Bombadil and Goldberry?
I don't know who you're talking about.
Tom Bombadil, the most famous deleted character.
Did you not invite Bombadil?
I don't think he would want to be here anyway.
Well, did you invite him?
Look, I don't trust the guy, okay? I think he might actually be evil. Why does the ring have no power over him?
He speaks highly of your husband.
You leave my husband out of this. I'm certainly not suspicious about why he keeps meeting up with the Bombadils in the old forest without telling me. I am not suspicious that he's having an affair with the both of them. I don't lie awake at night, picturing them in the riverbed. All of them bathing each other over and over and over and over and over.
Oof. Even I thought that was too much information.
We should probably get...
I left the oven on.
My wife similarly has very few questions about my relationship with Éomer.
Look, like him or not, he should at least be invited, right?
Fine.
Hey, doll, Mary doll.
Hey, Tom. We're having a support group for characters left out of the movies. You want to join?
Movies? Nah, we have no need for such things in the old forest. Support? Old Tom is his own support. Eldest, that's me. Tom is eldest and lives beyond need for movies and support for movies. Old Tom has his own things to care to, his own spin-off books, and Goldberry is waiting. And now, I shall recite 37 verses of a song.
Yep, he can make it. All right, everyone, let's have a great evening. I brought the mushrooms.
For the love of Morgoth, can we please f***ing dance?
Well, kids, that wraps up Tolkien Adaptation Month for this year. But don't worry, Dave will be back next year for another round of Tolkien Adaptation Month discussion. In the meantime, check out all the other great stuff and check out bonus features for Tolkien Adaptation Month on patreon.com/doggins. Please, I don't get paid enough to do this.
Hey. Oh, thank Christ, I thought she'd never shut up. Oh, that wacky squid game. Will they never learn?